the button, man. Let's fucking do this.
I pressed it. Whoa, watch out. All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to episode 404. 404, Brian. The website is down. Episode of Karlsson.
I don't know. It looks like it's working to me.
So far. We'll see. Anyone in the chat?
That was a call back to a private chat we had where you tried to show somebody that a 404 error meant a link wasn't working. And they sent back a screenshot of the website showing that it was a 404 error. And they said, no, it looks good to me. Because the brand's name was on the website.
Oh, yeah. That was really annoying. But that actually reminds me.
That's how you know someone's young, right? You got to know. I wonder if the new generation, at what point 404 errors are just it's unclear what that is. You never hit a 404 page. You're
saying old people wouldn't have seen it, or young people wouldn't?
No, young people wouldn't have seen it. 404s, I think, are less common because you're like 404s you'd get when you were sort of typing in exact URLs, which people don't do anymore. And then there was a brief window of time where 404 pages were like Easter eggs. It was fun. They make the 404 page fun or have a funny joke, a cute joke. And then it jumped the shark real quick. It was it had the same trajectory as April Fool's jokes on the internet. It's good one for 1 year. And then I still remember one. Do you remember Google Paper?
It sounds familiar. What was that?
They said that instead of they were starting Gmail, but Google Paper was a new service they were offering where you could get all your emails printed and sent to you. And it was actually fairly believable.
Oh, it was a prank. Yes.
Early internet.
Sorry, I'm actually in the middle of
not listening to me.
Well, our bosses changed the website that I'm supposed to go to find out what the ads are. I don't know why they made it harder to figure out what ads they want to stream.
Overlords.
It was at one point they would send us an email every week with a link to a Google Doc of what the ad reads are for the episode. And I thought that was a great system. And then they said, no, now you have to go to this website. And now that they've changed the website and it's what was it? Okay, so now I'm on this website. I don't even know. I'm still trying to find. Okay. So Tyler posted, here's this week's ads. Finally. All right. Do you even know that, Brian? Community. I don't even know. Anyways, whatever.
I don't know.
You have to worry about it.
This is your job.
My job to look up what ads we're supposed to read.
You keep the bosses happy.
All right. None. After all that, it's none. I guess I like it better if it's none. Yeah, you're the bad boy of keeping Karlsson.
I'm the bad cop.
I'm always apologizing for you. Guys, I promise I'm going to talk to him. We're going to get it straightened out.
You got to rein in Brian.
He's gone too far. Well, you dropped an F-bomb right before we went live here.
Yeah,
but
it's
luckily,
strategically.
I don't think it got on the show.
It didn't. There's no way.
All right, anyone in the chat that wants to compliment my audio, now's the time.
You could actually do it at any time through the episode, but Elon would love the validate, the reassurance.
Well, I also need it for Brian, right? Because I spent our company money to get this mic. If you think that I sound so much better than Brian, then also say that, because then we'll just have no choice but to also buy Brian a shirt, MV7, like mine.
I would kind of like the upgrade, I'll be honest.
Hey, I would love, I think it's, but
I just got this thing.
Honestly, any money in our business account is we might as well spend it, because if we take it out, you have to pay all this tax. It's better to just spend it rather than claim it.
Right.
Anyway, those are my thoughts.
I guess you're saying it's a write-off.
Well, it's not even a write-off. It's just nothing. I guess it's a business write-off. I don't even do our business taxes. I don't even know how that works. Someone else does that.
Oh, that reminds me. I need to put the last round of checks in the thing.
Thanks, Adam. He said it's a nice new mic, and I appreciate it.
Wow, nice. Yeah.
Their font. He says my audio is handsome. Love you. Okay.
Your audio is handsome.
We need to have business lunches, Brian. We should do order Uber Eats and then get on a Zoom call every time we want to talk about strategy.
You've mentioned this. And
I know that I messaged our accountant and he was no or something.
Remember what I told you?
That I need to schedule a call?
You have to call.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, we need to figure this all out. If anyone wants to come on the Keeping Karlsson team to teach us how to be smarter with how to, run a business, I think we could use it. All we know how to do is make podcasts and run fantasy leagues.
We just got stuck running a business somehow.
All right, let's record the show. I'm ready to go if you are.
I'm just putting something in our business books here.
In our business books?
In our business books.
What is it? What goes in the business books?
The checks that get written.
Oh. I didn't think you were actually going to put checks in the business books right now.
Well, otherwise I
just
forget.
Since we were talking. Oh, I see. All right, everyone who's watching live, just hold off for a sec. Brian's just going to do some quick accounting, some bookkeeping, and then we'll, I guess we'll start the show. Let's do some scoreboard watching. Well, how about this guy Blankenberg in Columbus, related to
Norm's nephew, right, or cousin?
Do you think that we should get Norm to get Nick Blankenberg on our show? Like, do you think we can pull off an interesting show talking to a hockey player?
We've also got to figure out if Ben and Lewis are dividend or salary.
Okay, let's talk about that not on the live show. Why are you saying this? It's not dividend. They're not co-owners.
We just need to remember.
It's for sure not dividend. They're not shareholders.
Right. You need to be a shareholder.
I could tell you that.
Wow.
I don't even know.
That's why you are a 50% owner of a business.
Blankenberg had a power play goal and an assist today in only 14 minutes and 25 seconds of ice time. Why didn't he play more?
So Norm, did you see how Norm said like he had a contract offer last year?
With who?
And didn't pass it up. I don't think he disclosed.
Oh, just because he wanted to go to college again?
Finish college or something.
Hey, did he get his degree?
I didn't follow up with Norm, but yeah, Blankenberg, he played 20 minutes a night for 3 nights in a row and played fewer than 15.
Did he get hurt? Maybe he got hurt or something.
Oh no, but he saw a nice chunk of PPT. OI.
Yeah.
He filled every category tonight. 1 power play point, 1 hit, 1 block, 1 goal, 1 assist. 2 PIMs.
I'm excited. I added him in my dynasty league just because of Norm, and now I did it like kind of just like it'll be fun to have the player that Norm's talking about. But now it's kind of like maybe he'll actually be a useful player next season. Help me not lose in the finals to Adam
Karlsson.
All right, ready to start the show, Brian?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who are about to go into full-on begging mode as we transition to our Beat Writer series in the summer. I am your host, Dylan Dubrowski, and with me, as always, is my very good friend, the guy who knows everything there is to know about fantasy hockey. That's right, it's the Poobah Prognostication, the IPP MVP, the fantasy hockey robot himself, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. I know so much about fantasy hockey, and yet, well, actually, let me just do that again. Sorry. $10 going to you. Like the longest road competition, like whoever goes the longest without an error.
That was there was this movie called 4 Rooms where there was a whole scene that built up about how like they were like betting on if the guy will be able to flick a lighter like 10 times in a row, and there was like, and if he can't, then they're gonna cut off his finger, and it was like so much build up, and then like he went like right away. It was like flip, failed, finger chop, like after like a half hour of build up, and this was you like the first thing you said. It was like edit after we talked about you're gonna have a perfect show. 99%.
Well, you say that I know everything about fantasy hockey. That's a lot. That's a lot, man.
I mean, hey, it's meant it as a compliment.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue the show.
All right. Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. Yes, here we are. We have what is it? Like 6 days plus a little more because of that Winnipeg-Seattle game that's been postponed. That's all that's left in the regular season before we hit the playoffs. And oh yeah, we are gearing up for our Keeping Karlsson playoff pool for all patrons. We'll share some details through the show about that. But if you want to get in on it, check it out right away. Link in our show notes, patreon.com/keepingkarlsson. Just $1. That's all it is. And what else? Well, we're going to talk about, like you said, we're going into full-on begging mode, Elon, which is in reference to how in the off-season we run, this is, I think, our third off-season running the 32 Beats series, where we are going to try and chat about every single team in the NHL with those who know them best, their beat writers. And there is some begging that goes into that, because we rely on the goodness and graciousness of all the beat writers who are willing to share their time with us, so we can just pound them with asking them like to just project players' fantasy hockey point totals and like forget about everything else they know, or use everything else they know. But it's actually a really great opportunity, because there's so much that we can work to project on the show with the numbers we have. But these beat writers know so much more about what is going on in the locker room and in the coach's mind and in the players' minds. So like there's all these like intangibles and little pieces that we can try and piece together as things to keep in mind to process when we are just working straight up with numbers to project where we think our players are going to land in their scoring next year.
Yeah, well, when I meant full-on begging mode, I didn't mean in terms of trying to beg them to give us the info we need. I meant more like get them to come on the show. Like, I'm sending all these like suck-up tweets and messages. I messaged Aaron Portzline from the Columbus Blue Jackets. He covers them, does a great job on The Athletic. I tweeted at him a couple days ago because I couldn't find his email. His DMs are off, no response. So, we used to go to Allison for the Blue Jackets, and she always did a great job. But now she's with Seattle, so I think we've got Seattle covered. But yeah, now we got to find a new Columbus beat writer. Anyway, this is a little behind the scenes of what we're going through here at Keeping Karlsson headquarters to try to get this beat writer series going. But yeah, this episode is going to be a preview of that, because Brian and I have decided, there's only 1 week left in the season. For those of you still playing, obviously good luck. We wish you the best in your finals. I feel like there's not much more we can tell you at this point. Grab Matty Beniers, because Seattle plays 4 times next week and he's doing great. Worry about your star players getting benched if the teams are already in the playoffs, right? Be like, Crosby and Malkin probably won't play all of the Pittsburgh games. But at this point, I don't think we're going to be able to give you too much advice. You've made it to the finals, right? Hopefully you know what to do from here. So instead, Brian and I are going to start looking forward. And yeah, since we have this beat writer interview series coming up, we thought we'd give you guys, like Brian and I would go through each team, coming up with what's the question we're most interested in getting the answer for each of these beat writer interviews we're going to do. So we're just going to go team by team and share with you, the listener, which are the things that are most on our mind going to the offseason for each team. And then obviously we'll discuss our own opinions while getting excited about hearing the real answers from the beat writers themselves. So that's the plan for today. Before we get into that, of course, let's quickly mention that Keeping Karlsson is very proudly presented by DobberHockey.com, as we have been all season. For the past few seasons, it's really cool to be able to say we're presented by the best fantasy hockey website in the world. They just keep going articles every day. I'm sure it'll be going all the way into the playoffs with your daily ramblings and fantasy impacts of everything going on, plus the tools at Frozen Tools. Unbelievable. Like, I could just message Eric Dowse whenever I want and like ask him for a feature on Frozen Tools, and he usually does it. Like, it's just such a great site. I love it. So yeah, Frozen Tools, Dobber Hockey, it's the best. But okay, Brian, let's get into things here. And yeah, so what's the plan? We've come up with our questions for each team. I think the idea is we're just going to alternate. And were you telling me, Brian, before that you want to like spin a wheel of teams and start on a random team? Do you have a mechanism for that? Or should we ask in the chat for the people to select which team we should start with? Or how do you want to do this?
Oh, yeah. So like we always, whenever we're covering every team in the league, we start with like Anaheim, because they're at the start of the alphabetical order, and then we work our way down, and like I get a little bored of that order sometimes. So I thought that maybe we could prep for every team but not know our starting point. And starting down the line at Winnipeg that's a little too obvious, and we've actually done that at least once or twice. So I thought, why not the teams in the middle? We never get to start with the teams in the middle. So I do have a random NHL generator in front of me. Shall I run it, Elon?
Yeah, let's also make this double as who we're predicting is going to win the cup if it turns out to be a playoff team. Let's do it.
Okay. The Stanley Cup champions in 2021, 2022, and the team that starts
this episode
two
is equally important things.
It's actually really anticlimactic. It's the Boston Bruins.
Well, that's not anticlimactic. I think it's a really good pick. They're a strong team.
Yeah, but we get to them third anyway if we're going alphabetical.
Well, we can't change it now. We have to stick with what your random generator gave us. So let's go to Boston. Who's gonna do it? Also, we were gonna alternate who throws the question out there. Should I do mine or do you want to do yours?
I have one for Boston.
Let's hear it.
We had a really hard time actually communicating about exactly how to prep for this show, but Boston is technically one of my teams.
Sounds
that I
good.
have. Okay. So my question for Boston, so hopefully we'll get to talk to Fluto Shinzawa again. And one thing I'd love to know from Boston is what the story is with their goaltending. Because last year, remember, they had Vladash and Swayman this time of year with, Tuukka Rask sort of stalking around in the background, being like the guy, but Swayman and Vladash were the ones who had to sort of hold the fort.
Sorry, I got to stop you here.
Yeah.
I'm like, is that what it is? I never heard that. So I always thought it was Dan Vladar. This is another one of these R's is a Ash type of things. This is Dan Vladash. Did you just make that up, or is this something you heard?
Vladar. I thought maybe someone was pulling my leg, but he's from the Czech Republic.
It could be.
And when you end, like, there's a famous Ottawa Senators defenseman, Stan Neckash, whose name was spelled Neckar. And so I think it's kind of like the R at the end of a Czech name can be like the K at the beginning of a Swedish name.
Sure. I mean, it seems like quite the swing if you don't know, but go for it. We've just never heard that. I've never said that before.
I know we've always called him Dan Vladar, and we haven't talked a lot. I'm going to go back to Vladar instead of getting too cute, because at least everyone is sure who we're talking about in that case. But anyway, so he ended up going off to Calgary and in a trade, and Boston was going with Swayman, and then they signed Linus Ullmark. And I was like, oh, okay, so they're not ready to pass the torch to Swayman entirely. And Tuukka Rask tried to make that attempted comeback this season, didn't work. So it became just Ullmark and Swayman, who seem to have a really nice dynamic as a tandem, right? Their goalie hug or celebration situation, it looks nice. And I think that actually goes a long way for team morale when you see both goalies who should be competing for starts feeling very supportive of one another. But if you just stop for a second and say, okay, well, what if Boston wants to give themselves the best chance of winning next year? Who are they going to go with? And a lot of these answers might come through playoff performances. But for me, the obvious choice has seemed like Jeremy Swayman looks better. He hasn't looked great, but he's looked better. He has .916 save percentage this year, and he's near his expected save percentage number. Meanwhile, Linus Ullmark, they signed him to a 3-year deal in Boston. Or wait, was it 5? Sorry.
Second edit point for Brian.
Yeah. Okay. Second negative point for Brian. Oh, it was 4. He just finished year 1 of a 4-year deal, and the raw save percentage actually looks pretty good compared to Jeremy Swayman, at .914 for Ullmark versus Swayman's .916. But his quality start percentage has been 51%. And that .914 has come from some really strong play on the penalty kill. He was playing far below his expected 5-on-5 Fenwick save percentage. That's Linus Ullmark. So to me, it looks like there's one obvious goalie, and Boston hasn't seemed to want to go with one obvious goalie. They seem to be happy to rotate back and forth. And I guess it's worked well enough for them this year. So my question for Fluto would be, is there any chance that Swayman can take the job from Ullmark, or even vice versa? But assuming that this trend continues, does Boston value Swayman's play more? And if they do, will he get more starts next year? Because having this Boston tandem hasn't been a really fun one.
I mean, I don't know. For the purposes of this episode, am I allowed to disagree? I just feel like I get what you're saying. I feel like I already know Fluto's answer. He's going to be like, they're both going to be given the opportunity next year, and whoever plays better will take the net. I don't. To me, I just wonder what he can really say.
This year, that hasn't been the case. Whoever plays better takes the net hasn't been the way it's worked. That's what I'm saying. Jeremy Swayman has played better, and he hasn't taken the net.
I know recently he's had Ullmark went on a run before he got hurt. But anyway, whatever. Yeah, so we'll see. And I guess the playoffs, like you said, are going to tell us a lot. I'll just say, I know that we're alternating here, and I don't want to spend too much time on Boston. The question I just have to throw it out there. The question I'm the most interested to hear what Fluto's going to say is this line 1 Jake DeBrusk thing going to be a thing next year? I just feel like I'd be so curious to know, after so many years of the perfection line, and then Jake DeBrusk was asked for a trade, and then now it seems like, why would he want to be traded if he's actually going to be a line 1 player? That's what he's probably wanted this whole time. So that'll be the question I'm curious to hear, if Fluto thinks that this is like a thing that's going to stick, or if it's going to once again go back to Pasta on line 1 next year.
Okay, actually, so that was the second question that I had prepared, and it probably is the more interesting one to answer. But I was looking at it from the lens of, is Pasternak and Hall, like, has that been a success on the second line to the point that it's going to be permanent? Like, take Jake DeBrusk out of the question, because I feel like that's like instant death to the question. It makes it so boring. Like, I hear Jake DeBrusk, my brain just shuts down at this point. He's achieving Yuri Lettera type sleepy status, just because no matter where he is or what he's doing, I never actually care. And I'm overthinking that I should start caring. He's been in such good places so many times, never produced. So I would actually be looking at it more from, it's the same question, but for me, it's even more like, is David Pasternak actually going to be on the quote unquote second line? And is that second line eventually going to become the first as Bergeron gets older and Marchand gets older too?
Yeah, well, Bergeron needs to sign a contract for next year, right? So that'll be another big question, obviously. Yeah, well, DeBrusk did have those, what was it, 5 games in a row with a goal. It was like 6 goals in 5 games. That was very exciting. But aside from that,
highlight of his career.
Yeah. He also actually had earlier on, at the end of February, he had that 4-point game. He had 2 really amazing stretches this season, which is more than he's ever done before. But yeah, obviously it'll help for him to be, like, if he's a line 1 guy next year out of training camp, I might take him with like the last pick of the draft. But anyways, okay, let's go to Buffalo now. It's officially my turn to give the question that I'll be most interested to hear the answer from whoever we interview with Buffalo. I don't even think we did a Buffalo interview last year. I'm thinking maybe
Did not.
I'm going to reach out to either Heather Engel or John Vogel. I don't know if we should be including who I'm planning to reach out to, but obviously, listeners, let us know as you listen to this episode. You could tweet at us if you have any specific beat writers, but maybe don't tag them. That might be awkward, right? Let us do the first reach out, but maybe on Discord more. Like, tell us, the patrons, if there's anyone you're really excited to hear about from a specific team. But Brian, should I give my Buffalo question here?
Yeah, please do. But I should mention, Elon, you're popping a bit, like your peas.
Popping.
Like, do you have a pop filter?
No, I guess I need to buy a pop filter now.
You definitely do.
Damn.
Do you want to know a tip to try not to pop your peas?
Sure, what?
So you can try and soften it into like sort of like a B, as you say the peas. Or if you try and like smile or like flatten your lips, like widen your mouth when you make the puh, it helps soften it.
Okay, so you're telling me I should smile more. Okay, I'll try.
Smile, sweetheart.
Okay. So yeah, the question I'm most interested to hear about on the Sabres is, like, was Jeff Skinner this good all along, and it's just that Ralph Kruger didn't know how to properly use him or just hated him, and like Don Granato knows how to unlock Jeff Skinner? Or did he like change something this year? Because his past 2 seasons, like 22 and 32 point paces, like just a complete non-factor in fantasy and for the team in general. This year, he was back on the top line, top power play, currently sitting at 33 goals and 62 points in 78 games. Like, what the heck? Where did this come from? And I just want to know, did Skinner change, or was it just the coaching change that unlocked Skinner's ability? That's what I'm going to be really curious to hear.
There were so many players in Buffalo who were bad last year, and I'm gonna go ahead and call them bad, but they're good this year. Like Jeff Skinner, for one, as you mentioned, Elon. Tage Thompson is another. We talked about him on our last Patron cast, which, by the way, sign up for $1 a month, you'll get access to the whole thing. Kyle Okposo, Casey Middlestat, who you're going to say, Brian, he wasn't bad last year. I think he's better this year. So we can at least agree on that. Like, I'm even at the point where could the ghost of Matt Molson have found some success on this squad if he was still around? So I have a very similar question to you, Elon. I think that's really great. How much of this team's success this season was coaching, and how much of it is repeatable? Ralph Kruger had a good reputation going into that Buffalo job, and he seemed to squander it entirely. He was known as like sort of like a good people person, a great communicator. And by the end, he was just a grumpy old man who refused to play Jeff Skinner. And then Don Granato came in and smoothed everything out and made it all sound nice. So I really like, actually, Don Granato seems great. Like, I really like his press conferences. He seems like genuine and kind and friendly. In any case, I would love to know the same thing as you, Elon. Like, why didn't Tage Thompson find success sooner? Watching him up close all season long from the start when he wasn't in the position he was by now, has something changed over the course of the season, or did something change before? Because we talked on the Patreon cast how Tage Thompson, I don't know what the heck happened with him. He was this low grade prospect like a late first rounder in St. Louis, which is not necessarily a great chance of panning out from the start, especially as a top line player and who had some opportunities, never made much of them. Suddenly, something has clicked. So I want to know exactly what clicked. I'm also curious to find out what Rasmus Dahlin's ceiling is. He's had a really quietly fantastic finish to the season. Over his last 40 games or so, I think he has 30 points ish, and he's on almost a 60-point pace over the back. I
can answer that for you, Brian. It's high. Okay. His ceiling is very, very high. I think it's like a 70-point ceiling if he ever,
So when's he going to get there is also something I'd be curious to hear, right? Because he was minus 21 this year. He was playing 24 minutes a night, which is huge, right? There's a lot of ice time, tons of power play responsibility on a power play that suddenly at the start of the year would be like, oh, there's nobody there. You have Victor Olofsson. But now it's like, yeah, you got Skinner, you got Tage Thompson, you've got Rasmus Dahlin, and that's enough. And Dylan Cousins and Peyton Krebs on the come up too. So that's what I would wonder about Buffalo.
Yeah. Alex Tuck. We always loved him. So yeah. Okay. So Brian, let's go to Calgary now. It's your turn. But I feel like you also took a Buffalo turn. That's cool because I took a Boston turn. But now we'll get back to our official alternating status. Okay. So Calgary Flames, what do you got?
Rasmus Andersson. Speaking of Rasmi, I really want to know what happened to Rasmus Dahlin after January 18th or on.
You mean Rasmus Andersson?
Shoot.
Oh,
yeah.
Next edit point.
I want to know what happened to Rasmus Andersson on January 18th. Since then, he has 32 points in 45 games, 12 power play points in that span. That's a near 60-point pace for Rasmus Andersson. Before that, picking up these 12 power play points in 45 games, Andersson went over 2 full months without a single power play point. Of course, he's beyond clicking now. And another way to frame this sudden surge and success of Rasmus Andersson is he's got 12 power play points in his last 45 games. He had 12 power play points in his previous 90 games before this stretch began. And he was largely a power play quarterback in that time too. So he's looked like a brand new player in a lot of ways since January. And I want to know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one answer could be just Calgary overall is just exploding as a team, scoring a lot of goals. Did you know that Johnny Gaudreau going into today is 3rd in league scoring? Gaudreau has 111 points in 79 games. Huberdeau is ahead of him with 114 and McDavid 116. So it's kind of close. Gaudreau could theoretically win the scoring race. And Matty Tkachuk isn't too far behind. Lindholm's having an amazing season. So that'll be an interesting question from the Calgary beat writer. We're going to try to reach out to Haley Salvian, who we talked about the Sens a couple of years ago. And now she's moved to Calgary. So that would be a great interview. And yeah, I'll be curious to know how much of it was, Rasmus Andersson and how much of it is just any defenseman running the power play was going to get a lot of points this year, just because the team's been so amazing. But okay, here's my Carolina question that I want to ask to we had Chip Alexander on before. I've reached out to another Carolina person over the years that's never responded, but Chip was a really good interview last time we talked to him, so I'll try to get him again, I think. But yeah, my main question here is not about one of the top players. It's kind of the opposite of your question about Rasmus Andersson. It's what happened to Marty Necas? Last season, he had 63 points. He was looking, or paced for 63 points. He was looking like he was an up-and-coming superstar in the league, or maybe if not a superstar, a really valuable fantasy player, at least a 60-point player. This year, he's been a total dud, right? 37 points in 75 games. I'm curious to know, is Necas just... Did he not play as well? Did his role change? I'm just curious to get a sense of what is management thinking about Necas, who was a first-round pick that was looking to be this really solid guy for years to come. And this year, he's ended the season in free agency in pretty much all my leagues.
For sure. It's very strange. We did not see, we were looking at the possibility. The preseason argument was, could Necas get on the top power play? Not only did Necas fail to get on the top power play this season, but he lost a minute of ice time total. That's mostly coming at 5-on-5 and was playing a lesser role. He was shooting a little less for the time he was on the ice, and very little power play success. He had 11 power play points in 53 games last season from the second unit, which was not sustainable. But this year, just 4 power play points in 76 games from Necas. So really a lot going very wrong for him. Also a career low shooting percentage of the 3 seasons he's played in the league. So I feel like there's a few things that happened here that we can use to describe why Necas didn't get back up to 63 points, but we don't have insight into why his deployment not only didn't improve, but it actually slid backwards. So I think finding out if coach was unhappy or if he took a step back and wasn't quite ready to jump up. Next year will be Nehas's age 24 season. That'll be a big one for him. So I'll be very interested to hear what the Carolina beat writer has to say about him going into that season. On the other side of a player's career, or were you trying to get in there?
Sorry, what's that?
Were you trying to jump in?
No, I'll raise my hand.
Okay. On the other side of a player's career and wondering what's going to happen to them in Chicago, I want to know about Patrick Kane. He's someone we chatted about on the show a couple months ago when his goal totals were not as good as they've ended up being. He was pacing for, I think, under 90 points when we spoke about him and his struggles. And we brought up how Patrick Kane, he paced for just 22 goals last season, which was the lowest since his rookie campaign when he scored 21 goals in 2007, 2008. And really a fair deal below most seasons that Patrick Kane has played since the lockout shortened 2012-13 season. And last year, Patrick Kane deserved just only those 22 goals to some extent. He had the lowest individual expected goals rates of his career. His shot rates were down too. This year, Patrick Kane has turned things around a little bit since we last spoke, and we're wondering, could he even hit 90, let alone continue to be a 100-point pace player? Kane is now pacing for 28 goals. It's still a little low for him, but it's at least close to 30 and is better than last year's 22. But under the hood, Kane is still kind of stuck in a lower gear the same way he was last year. We're seeing lower shot rates, lower expected goals rates, and a lower shooting percentage for the second straight year, which sometimes we'd be like, that's bad luck. But I'd also look at Patrick Kane and say, hey, he's getting older and it looks like his shots aren't quite as dangerous. So maybe that lower shooting percentage is actually here to stay. We've seen this happen before with aging players who just can't get to as dangerous areas as often as they once could. Now, Patrick Kane, like I said, is still on pace for a near 100-point pace this season. And that's because he's had a crazy power play point performance this year, 31 points already with the men advantage. That's pacing for his second highest power play point total ever in his career. So without that, I'd actually be pretty concerned if he wasn't basically having the best power play season of his life. I don't think he'd be pacing for 100 points. So it's a tough question to ask because he is having such a successful year at the end of the day. But I'm seeing some signs under the hood and red flags that I'm wondering, is it time to downgrade our expectations from Patrick Kane now that he's about to enter his age 34 season? Or could we reasonably expect another century season for him for another year or two? And I feel like part of the answer is going to be, my follow-up would be, how do other players in the lineup impact Kane's future? Jonathan Toews seems to be a shadow of his former self. Dylan Strome has been up and down. Tyler Johnson has not panned out the way Chicago hoped he would. And I want to know how all of that impacts Patrick Kane, because he is in a lot of leagues that value points, like straight up points and goals. He's a first round talent, maybe second round at the latest, at least going into this year before everybody became a 100-point player. But I want to know if he's still in that upper elite tier, or if this is the time where we see enough red flags that it's time to downgrade him.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, I think a big part of that is who is his center, right? Because this year, at the start of the year, it was, I think Kirby Dach got a shot, some players got a shot, but Dylan Strome midway through the season, I think my question would be related to that is specifically Dylan Strome, right? Kind of like my Jeff Skinner question, right? All of a sudden, Dylan Strome midway through the season became line one, power play one center, and he's had this insane season. You say he's been up and down. He basically has been down for a little bit and then up to the skies, right? He only had 3 points in his first 14 games, 44 points in his last 52 games since he's gotten on the top power play. That's a 69-point pace in that stretch. So I feel like if Dylan Strome is actually this good, and now if we could be confident that Patrick Kane has this really good 70-point center playing with him at even strength on the power play, that will obviously help, because it seems like Kirby Dach is sort of not panned out the way we hoped he would so far. But if Dylan Strome can step in and be a really good top line center for him, then obviously that'll help, right?
For sure. Right. And that's exactly part of the question. Can Dylan Strome step in and keep, is he good enough to prop up Patrick Kane, who doesn't look like, I mean, of course he's not as strong as he once was. We've talked about players being able to stay elite longer than they historically have. But I don't know that Patrick Kane, like 2 straight years, having a pretty pedestrian expected goals rate from a guy who's made a career of scoring 40 goals in a season, that really concerns me. So I would want to know how strong Dylan Strome could possibly be.
Yeah, I mean, because he's also going to be someone that potentially could be a steal in drafts next year. Because I'm sure a lot of people will not want to take him early because who knows, he could end up getting demoted or like benched like he was at times this season, or he could be this like 70-point player. So Dylan Strome is, definitely someone I'm going to want to hear about. All right, so I guess it's my turn to do Colorado. I guess I got another one of these players who sort of has been a nobody for a long time, and then this year like sort of changed the narrative completely. That's Valerie Chuchkin. Like I want to ask, like, what changed in Valerie Chuchkin's game for him to break out? Like he's been a near 70-point pace player this season. He's been in the league a long time, right? He's had 6 seasons in his career. He was drafted 10th overall. He was a huge disappointment with Dallas. Remember, he ended up leaving for Russia for a bit, but like since he's come back, whatever. Last year also in Colorado, nothing special, and then this year all of a sudden 70-point player. So it's like, the obvious question will just be like, where did this come from? Did anyone see it coming? Do we think he'll be able to do this again? So yeah, that'll be my Colorado question. Which last year we talked to Peter Baugh, and it was great. By the way, Ben Burnett is going to be doing a lot of these beat writer interviews, and I know Ben interviewed Peter, so I'll be interested to hear that dynamic duo go again and talk about the Avs.
I'll also throw it out there now. If you have a question too, like if you're listening to our questions, like, no, I have a better, deeper question. There's lots of room for questions. So you make sure to let us know. We'll probably also put a call out on our Discord server for our patrons to share what they want to know. But Elon, the question that underpins this question about Nichushkin is like whether he is still on the Avs, right? By the time we even have this conversation with Peter Baugh. So we'll see. I'm sure they'd love to keep him at 2.5 million, but with the season Nichushkin has had, he's established himself as like when he signed this contract, not this season, he signed it at the start
a couple
of
years ago,
2020, right? So after the COVID interrupted season, he started. I mean, we've had a few COVID interrupted seasons, but when he signed it, he was like, is he or isn't he an NHLer? Like, we'll try him in the middle 6, a lot of years in Dallas, failing to gain traction. This is now his 3rd season in Colorado. In his first 2, he's pacing for 30, 35 points. This year, bumped up to a top 6 role. He's playing almost 19 minutes a night. Previously, aside from his rookie season in Dallas, Nichushkin had never played more than 14 minutes a night. So this is a huge increase in responsibility. Also getting a substantial power play role, even though it's on the second unit. It still helped Nichushkin pick up at least 9 of his points for the season. So Nichushkin has done some amazing things. And I think he's finally showing the sort of panache and skill that we saw from him in his rookie season in Dallas that we haven't seen since. So it'll be really interesting to see what Nichushkin can get out on the open market at this point, because I don't think he's going to be a 2.5 million lotto ticket for any team this offseason.
Definitely not. No, Colorado is going to be interesting. I think we're going to have to wait for our Colorado beat writer interview. We're going to have to do that one last because they have so many questions marks like this that we're going to have to wait until at least the UFA season like kind of comes and goes. Like, like Kadri is also a UFA, Nichushkin, also their goalies, right? Kemper, like what are they? Obviously the playoffs are going to determine a lot. Like if Kemper has this great playoffs, then maybe he'll earn himself like a big contract extension, or maybe if he, totally blows up, then maybe they decide to go for a different goalie next year. So yeah, Colorado is going to be an interesting team, both for the playoffs. Obviously, they're one of the heavy favorites to win. I guess them in Florida. I don't know. I guess you could throw out a few teams, or Boston, since our random generator selected them. But I think that there are going to be a very interesting team in the offseason just to see what they're going to end up doing with all these UFAs. But okay, Brian, I guess let's go to... Oh, sorry.
That's good. Yeah. We've seen Tampa and Vegas have to deal with the cap crunches and like jettisoning players. And like you said, Elon, it'll be really like Colorado has a legit problem on their hands. So we'll see how they choose to get through it, and if they sort of thin out their ranks and try and insert role players, same way we've seen past really great teams do in Chicago and LA, and we saw where that led them. You might be able to buy 1 or 2 more years of contention, but then it's straight down. But Colorado still has enough young players to be wanting to push for another, try and keep their window open for another 5 to 7 years. And if the top half of their lineup, like the Tampa recipe is keep the top half of your lineup as strong as you can, then find those role players to come in and do the job. And we'll see. We'll see what Joe Sakic does after being basically laughed at as a GM for his first couple years in the league. But ever since that Duchene trade turned in Colorado's favor, no one's laughing at Joe now. Speaking of a team where, well, I was going to say people are laughing at, but that's not nice.
Actually, can I jump in? I want to actually respond anyways to what you were saying about the Avs. Yeah, well, one nice thing for Colorado is if they lose Nichushkin, you know, that would be a bummer. Even if they lose Kadri, that would be huge. But luckily for them, they also have, like we've talked about how like rich they are, because not only do they have all these high-end players, they also have these prospects coming up. Like Alex Newhook is only 21 years old. He's supposed to be an up-and-coming star, so maybe he can take over for one of those guys. They just signed this guy, Ben Mayers, right, who we talked about last episode, who people are saying is going to be something. So lucky for the Avs, they have some new ELC guys that they'll be able to put into these roles if they're not able to keep like all their star players. But yeah, Brian, let's go to Columbus now. It's your turn. I already see from your side of the notes that you have the wrong player that you want to ask about, so I'll correct you afterwards. But yeah, interested to hear what you have to say about Columbus.
I don't know who you want to sort out more than Oliver Bjorkstrand, who we talked about this specifically through the show. Like we were begging beat writers to ask this question of Columbus coaching and management during the season when Oliver Bjorkstrand's shot totals just went poof. They disappeared. And he's been so inconsistent this year. We've been scratching our heads about Oliver Bjorkstrand all season long, spent a lot of breath on him when in a season where we expected him to really explode by finally adding top power play deployment with solid top six deployment, which ended up not being so solid, but that's what we were expecting. But this is a guy who started off really well, and then Bjorkstrand disappeared entirely for a couple months, barely shooting, which was so weird. This is like the first time in his career he stopped shooting. And of course, he was certainly not scoring. But to put it in numbers, Bjorkstrand was shooting nearly 4 shots a game to start the year, and then went to 25-game stretch where Bjorkstrand averaged fewer than 2 shots per game. And there's been some feast and some famine. Lately, it's famine. Again, Bjorkstrand coming into today's action had just 6 shots in his last 5 games. It's rare to see a player put up consistent runs of 5 4-shot games and like more than the occasional 7 or 8-shot game, but then go completely silent for games at a time too. You don't see players sort of whiplash back and forth like this from 0 and 1 shots to 6 to 7 shots. So I want to know what's going on. What does the organization see for Bjorkstrand in the future? Why did those low shooting streaks happen? Was he injured? Was it coaching direction? Was he not able, like one of my theories through the season was he's not playing with a solid enough center that he has turned out to need to help balance the possession game and actually get opportunities. But even beyond that, the fact that he's still succeeded in having multiple 4+ shot games means that can't be the whole story. So I want to know the full story, which we haven't been able to figure out. Why has Oliver Bjorkstrand stopped shooting for large periods of time?
Yeah, well, I remember going into the season in our interview last year with Alison Lukan. She was like saying how Bjorkstrand's probably their best player, and I don't think that the next interview, will say the same thing after how this season went. But like the player I really want to ask about, and I knew you wouldn't, but it's like just someone because we've been like debating about this player since forever. Like back in the early days of keeping Karlsson, Boone Jenner had a good season, and then I made a bad prediction that he would. I don't even forget exactly. I don't remember exactly how it went, but I said something about like how I thought he would be good again, and you were like, you don't think so, and then you were right, and then you were like continuously right as he continued to be a nobody year after year. And then this season, out of nowhere, Boone Jenner turned into like a star again. He had a 61-point pace. In fantasy, he was unbelievable because he was filling all the categories, line 1, power play 1C. So I again, kind of like similar to my question about Buffalo, like, do we just blame Tortorella on wasting so many years of this like potential like top line, top power play capable player? Like maybe under Brad Larson, he finally knows how to make use of a Boone Jenner. So that'll also be a question I'll be interested to get the answer to for sure. Like, is he actually good, or am I going to make the mistake again now of expecting Boone Jenner to repeat and for him to go back to being a nobody?
As the repeated Boone Jenner non-believer, I think I switched to believer pretty early on this season, seeing what he'd done with that 1C deployment that he was getting and playing with Line and Voracek who were clicking together. But this has definitely been the heaviest role that Boone Jenner has played in his entire career. And when I talked about Oliver Bjorkstrand not having a center to steady him that he needed, Boone Jenner would have been that centerman for him and has been in the past. He's that one, I think the one reliable two-way centerman in Columbus. So he's done a fantastic job. His on-ice shooting percentage this year has been higher than any other year, but that's just because he's playing on the top line rather than the third line. And the third line in Columbus has not been a pretty place to play. And Boone Jenner, I don't think, has ever really been asked to score a whole lot of goals with his team while he's on the ice. So, Elon, I think that's a really great question to try and dive in and see. Like, I want to know more about Oliver Bjorkstrand because I feel like I understand where Boone Jenner is at now. Like, I can get that. I've adjusted to it. I still have so many questions about Bjorkstrand and his future, but I totally understand why you thought I asked about the wrong player in Columbus. Who is the right player to ask about? And when we eventually, hopefully, find a Dallas beat writer to interview.
Okay, yeah, I think I'll want to reach out to like Sad Youssef, but we'll see if we can get him or we'll go to someone else. Also, again, like if anyone knows Aaron Portsline, I tweeted at him. I'm waiting for the response there. But I don't know. Maybe this is a dumb thing to be doing in the episode, just like naming people. But I feel like it's almost like it gets in my head. Like I go from being like this like grown adult that has like what I need and I don't need to ask people for things to all of a sudden be like, please, please come on my show. But like I want, but they're so good. Like we're asking the best people. So obviously you have to expect that you're not going to get all of them. But okay, so Dallas. Actually, Brian, how about before we get to Dallas? We've gotten through the C's. That's always when we're going alphabetically through the teams. It's always a milestone when we get through all the C teams. So why don't we stop down here, take a quick break, and then we'll come back fresh and ready to go for the rest of the alphabet. So we'll be back in just a sec. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson.
I wonder if you turned your mic down a little. Like I am getting like this mic is too good for you right now. Like it's picking up like too much like breathiness.
So you're saying I should turn it down?
I don't know, maybe if you had some gain or you can just maybe run a pop remover on the edit.
Yeah, I'll fix it in post. I'll see how that.
I'm just really I'm hearing a lot more.
It might also be that yeah, I don't know. I can't really change it now. Like I don't want to mess with the.
Yeah, no, don't mess with it. Okay, I won't make any more comments unless I hear something new. But it's also like just to so you're aware, like maybe to breathe or mute carefully.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we'll figure it out. This is all a new experiment. Yeah.
Take one deep breath.
Yeah, I'll do one deep breath for the rest of the show. Okay. All right, we are back, Brian, and let's go to the D's now. Let's go to Dallas. Here's my question that I'm going to want to ask our Dallas beat writer, and that's like, is Tyler Seguin ever going to be given the opportunity to earn the like near $10 million he's going to be hitting the cap with for the next 5 seasons? Like, I don't like. In other words, I want to know, is he the same player? But also, like, even if he is, maybe it won't matter in terms of his production because maybe Rick Bowness just doesn't like him like the other coaches did, or maybe he's changed since the injury. So I just want to get a general Tyler Seguin check. I know, Brian, we've talked about him before on the show and about how like his ice time is way down. He's been like not a consistent top power play guy. Like sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not. At the end of the day, he's got 46 points in 78 games on the season, which is fine, but not something you expect from a $10 million player. That contract still has a lot of years left. So I'm going to want to just get a sense of how people are feeling about Tyler Seguin now that he's had a full season back after all those injuries.
For sure. He's still only on a 50-point pace and taking fewer than 3 shots per game, which is not ideal, but he is seeing like an okay chunk of power play time. He's sort of like a power play 1B at best, like after a couple runs on the top unit. I don't know. If the question is whether he's going to be able to earn that $10 million or come close to it, I think for me, it's not, can he? It's, do the Stars want him to? Like, what could they do to get more out of Tyler Seguin? And if there is something they could do, why aren't they doing it? Because in his 80-point seasons, give or take 10 points, he was playing 19, 20 minutes a night. For the last 2 seasons, he's playing 17. From this past season, he's playing fewer than 18 minutes a night. The one before that, he's playing 19 minutes a night. So there's a direct correlation. Like they've taken down Tyler Seguin's role to the point that he can't do what he would normally do. Maybe the injury is part of it, and I think that's a good angle to take. But I just still want to know. It's the question I've had about a lot of players in Dallas. Like what's stopping them from trying to get more? Or is there a route to get more out of Tyler Seguin? Like he's not old. He's 30 years old. He'll be in his age 31 season next year. So I'm very curious to hear what Dallas's plans are. I'm sure they'd love to deal him, but they're not going to find a team that'll take it. And for any kind of salary retention deal that Dallas will be willing to swallow, I feel like we'll take instead of paying Tyler Seguin $5 million to play someone else, we'll pay him $10 million and get 50 points from him. It's kind of like a lose-lose.
Well, I don't know. Yeah. The thing is, we don't know, right? That's, I guess, why I will ask, right? Like, if he was getting the same deployment as Jason Robertson, would he be putting up similar points as Jason Robertson? Or is he like a decidedly worse player than Jason Robertson at this point? You know, so that's the kind of thing that we'll find out from this interview we do with the Dallas Stars beat writer. But okay, Brian, let's go to Detroit. What do you have for us here? What are you going to want to ask Prashanth, he's been so nice and has given us an interview every year. So I assume we're going to get Prashanth again. What do you want to ask him?
Yeah, Prashanth is always like our leadoff batter too in the series. I feel like he started it off a couple of years ago, and he was on the front end last year too. I want to ask Prashanth something that he pointed out on Twitter not long ago that we'd sort of been tracking, which is that Tyler Bertuzzi has had a tale of two seasons. He was a point per game player, 40 points in 39 games before the All-Star break. Since then, 18 points in 27 games after the All-Star break. And we also talked about Tyler Bertuzzi on the show and how he had been bumped off the top line, playing on the second line with Robbie Fabry and Elon. I can't even remember who the other guy was. But regardless, it was...
Well, let's make an edit point and look it up. So
sorry.
By the way, Brian, we're only like a third of the way. Yeah, not even through the teams.
Try and go faster.
Yeah, maybe just like focus on your questions and I'll focus on mine. But we don't have to do as much commenting on the other one.
Playing with Robbie Fabry and Pius Suter. And while Bertuzzi seemed to be producing there, we pointed out on the show that it didn't seem sustainable. Like it seemed like some fake chemistry was happening and that the top line was definitely the better place for Tyler Bertuzzi. This seemed like some fake chemistry, and that the top line definitely seemed like the better place for Tyler Bertuzzi to be. And we didn't believe that his second line production could really sustain. And I think we were right by the time he ended up getting put back onto the top line with Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin. But I still wonder what exactly is going on with Tyler Bertuzzi. I think he's another player who the team might be looking to move on from. He's asked for a fresh start. Detroit didn't seem to really support him in his choices around vaccination going into the season. So that's what I want to know. Which Tyler Bertuzzi, classic Keeping Karlsson question, which Tyler Bertuzzi is the real one? And then my other question for Prashanth, just because it's been a theme the last two seasons, is that Dylan Larkin, he's always said Dylan Larkin is a good centerman, right? He could be a top line center, but I think ideally on a cup contending team, Dylan Larkin is a second line center. But now Dylan Larkin just put up 80 points and had a fantastic season from start to finish until like being very suddenly shut down for the year. But up until then, I'm curious to hear Prashanth's take whether Dylan Larkin has made strides towards convincing him that he's now a bona fide number one centerman on a serious contender with his performance this year.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to get a sense of like, are we just going to give the credit to Lucas Raymond for like elevating Larkin, or did Larkin do something himself? But okay, so let's go to Edmonton now. I think the question I'm going to be most interested to ask Alan Mitchell if we get him again. We've had him low tide for the past couple of seasons. I'm going to want to ask, like, what are the thoughts on Zach Hyman? We're 1 year into the 7-year contract he signed. Are the Oilers happy with their $5.5 million per year purchase? Like, he's had a pretty decent season, right? 25 goals, 51 points in 72 games. Going into today, it's a 58-point pace. So yeah, I'm just going to want to get a general vibe check. You know, it's just funny because the Leafs got Bunting to, I guess, essentially like replace Zach Hyman, right? Like Bunting's the one been playing with Matthews and Marner, and he's had such a great season at like a fraction of the cost. So I wonder if the Oilers might be thinking, oh, maybe we should have just gotten Bunting, or maybe they're really happy about it. So I'll be curious to guess. And I guess also with that, that's definitely going to be the kind of thing where let's see how they do in the playoffs, right? Because if the Oilers make it through a couple of rounds for the first time in forever, then I'm sure they'll be very happy with everything they did. Maybe like wrongly so. Like maybe they'll be like, oh, see, getting Duncan Keith was the right move because look, we finally got past a couple of rounds of the playoffs. So we'll see what Low Tide says there. But yeah, I'm curious to get a check on like all those offseason moves and specifically Hyman.
Yeah, I mean, if Edmonton does make it past the first round of the playoffs, I don't think that automatically will justify the Duncan Keith. I think it might still be in spite of, or maybe he, honestly, I haven't been following, like Duncan Keith is not a relevant player to me. So it would be great to hear if the Edmonton, if the minds we trust in the Edmonton fan base and watch base have grown to like some of those offseason moves that we were somewhat critical of going into last season. Next team on the docket is Florida. And how could we not ask about the guy that we've been asking about all season long in Sam Bennett? You've got Dr. Jekyll on one hand and Mr. Hyde on the other. If I could remember which was the nice one and which was the evil one, I would make it more specific a reference. But there's a general look at how Sam Bennett has shown us two different people this season. Point per game at home, 35 points in 35 games, more hits, more shots at home per game. And then on the road, Sam Bennett scores just a point every 3 games on average, 12 points in 33 games, and takes half as many shots, scores on half as many shots too. So it's not just a counting thing, right? Like we've talked about how maybe the Florida scorekeeper is a little more generous with shots and hits and attributing more to the home teams and maybe the away teams too. But Sam Bennett is also shooting half as successfully, 7.5% on the road compared to 14% at home. And that's just a big split. It seems too big and too consistent across the board in all his categories to seem like a coincidence. So that's what I want to know about Sam Bennett. And I also want to ask the general question of like, is this like an open secret that Florida does give their guys more shots and hits than other arenas in the league might offer them?
Yeah, I wonder if that would be something they would admit. Okay, so over in LA, I actually have a very similar question to my Edmonton question, but maybe this one is a little more dire, right? Is management regretting the contract they gave to Cal Peterson last year? That's going to start next season, 3 years, $5 million per year for a goalie that hasn't played in April yet, I don't think. Jonathan Quick has played the last 6 games for LA. He's been amazing, helping LA like basically clinch the playoffs at this point. He's the clear starter going into the playoffs. We might not see Cal Peterson again like for the rest of the season. But Peterson's been a pretty big bust this year, right? .895 save percentage in his 36 games. Maybe there was a couple times throughout the year when like he went on a small little run, but overall, just like clearly not someone the team can count on. As soon as they realized, oh, we might be a team that can make the playoffs, they were right away like, we need to get away from Cal and get to Jonathan Quick here. So I'll be very curious to know if like the team was like, if they could have a do-over, would they not sign Cal Peterson to this contract, or are they still feeling like, yeah, he's our future goalie, and you know we're not worried at all? So I'll be curious to see what the beat writer says about that.
It's kind of this cruel irony where, you know, the Kings made their famous tweet after signing Jonathan Quick to that 10-year deal saying 10 more years of our goalie being better than yours. That was after he helped sort of the Kings form that somewhat dynastic team. And ever since then, he's not been better than most goalies in the league. And they finally invest in another goalie, Cal Peterson. And unfortunately, that isn't working out, even though I still have hope that it will. So we'll see what the LA beat writers say. On to Minnesota, where this is a conversation we had on our Discord server through the week. And it was about Kevin Fiala, who is just going nuts this season, or this back half of the season. Now he's up to, Now he's up to 21 points in his last 9 games. He's already the second leading scorer in Minnesota, even though like he's past Matt Zuccarello, even though he basically was non-existent for the first half of the year. And so we had the question in our Discord is like, okay, he's done this 3 times now. Do we just draft Kevin Fiala and accept that he doesn't do anything in the first half and he's going to show up in the second half? We don't need to worry about it. Or do we actually hope like this time it's actually going to work all season long? And of course, that led to the conversation that Kevin Fiala started stepping up around the time Matt Boldy came along. Then the counterpoint was like, well, Kevin Fiala usually steps out right around that point anyway. So did Matt Boldy help juice Fiala's numbers during that time? Or was it actually the other way around and Fiala was just getting going and was juicing Boldy's numbers? So I want to know more about that relationship and dynamic between who made who the better player. I did look at some of the with or without you charts on Hockey Viz, and it didn't seem like either guy really pulled the other in such a positive direction or negative or any direction. It was a generally muted impact they seem to have on one another. But of course, there was chemistry that was undeniable. So I want to know, I want to unpack the dynamic between Matt Boldy and Kevin Fiala. And I also want to ask that from the beat writer's perspective, who watches Kevin Fiala come to work every single day, do they notice a difference in the second half of the season? Is there anything else that we're missing here that we can't see in his numbers that does change? Does Kevin Fiala look disengaged for the first bit of the season? And then like one day in December, you can see that switch is flipped in his eyes.
Yeah, I'll be really interested to hear the answer to that as well. Like, I feel like I'm bought in, like, unless, they answer otherwise. I feel like I'm ready to, like, bank on Fiala being, like, this great player all season long next year, though I've felt that before. But yeah, like, Boldy is, like, a, highly touted prospect. He's come in to be even better than people expected. But like you said, it could just be that Fiala was going to explode with whoever he was playing with. And, like, Boldy and Freddie Gaudreau, we shouldn't, like, ignore him, right? He's also had this, like, great second half of the year, again, playing with Fiala and Boldy. So yeah, I'll be interested. Also, we'll see in the playoffs, right? If this line continues to be fire through Minnesota's playoff runs. Let's go to Montreal now. And here's another player who was like pretty disappointing. Well, so disappointing that he got sent to the minors to start the season and now has been amazing. And that's Cole Caulfield. I'm going to want to ask Arpon Basu if we could get him again. Should we carry all that hype that we had for Cole Caulfield going into this season? Is it fair to just like now like shift that over and have that same hype for next season? Or do we have to be like, well, maybe we need to learn a lesson from the fact that Caulfield let us down because he, like I said, did nothing at the start. 1 goal and 8 points in his first 29 games, got sent to the minors, but then Marty St. Louis took over. We all know the story, right? 19 goals and 32 points in the last 35 games for Caulfield going into today. So he's been a completely different player. And, Marty St. Louis, I assume, is going to still be the coach next year. I think it's almost a guarantee. So, yeah, I'm just curious to know could we be confident that this is a superstar, the superstar we were hoping he would be going into this year? And, like, is it for real now? I think the answer is going to be yes. But, it'll be fun to get the real answer from the beat writer.
I think the answer will also be yes. And I'd also like to hear how many other Habs can we rely on now that we think we can rely on Caulfield, we think we can rely on Suzuki, but no one else has really stepped up on that top line as a third piece that can consistently produce. So that would be my follow-up question to that. And Arpon has been a great interview in the past, so I hope we can get him again. Over in Nashville, who I don't think we've successfully ever gotten a Nashville beat writer on 32 Beat. So here's hoping we'll send out some good vibes about it. But we've never really gotten to dig deep. In the past, the question would always be like, what is wrong with this power play? It's just not working. And that's been the story of Nashville the last several years. No player except Roman Josi can produce. And Roman Josi somehow like superhumanly does it without big power, or he puts up big power play numbers on power plays that are broken, but no one else does. Matt Duchene, Mikhail Granlund, Philip Forsberg even. And this year, they're all coming up in spades. Everything is working out for Nashville, both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. So I want to know what changed and can we expect it to hold? Like, can we put that broken Nashville power play of the past in the past? Can it stay there? And then my next question would be, Nashville came up with 3 young players who earned bigger roles this season. Actually, Eeli Tolvanen, his role actually seemed to decline through multiple parts of the season. But between Philip Tomasino, who had 30 points, Tanner Jeannot, who had 41 points, Eeli Tolvanen, who had 22 points, which of these young players who they all seem like they have fantasy relevant potential, especially Jeannot, who was fantasy relevant most of the season. Which one of these guys is most likely to outdo themselves next year? And who's the biggest part of the Predators' plan going forward that we can look to as being somebody who's going to get a nice bump in deployment next year, new opportunities, and who might surprise us by breaking the mold that they set for themselves this year, whether it was good or bad?
Yeah, I know that if we had Victor Nuno from Fantasy Hockey Life on, he's going to be high on Tomasino because he was really high on Tomasino going into this year. So that's my hunch as to where the answer will be. Though Jeannot, like he scored so many goals this year, like probably in an unsustainable way. But yeah, it's cool. And like, Nashville, you're right. This power play really unlocked some players. Like how about Matt Duchene also going from being a nobody for kind of like Jeff Skinner, right? It's kind of almost the same question. Like he signed a big contract, then he went to do nothing in his first year at Nashville, or especially his second year in Nashville was especially quiet. He was in free agency in all my leagues, and now this year, like greater than point per game. So how does that happen? I'll want to know, like, was it like a coaching difference? Did Matt Duchene just like show up as a better player this year? So yeah, that'll be a fun interview if we could ever get a Nashville beat writer. We'll try our best. Let's go to New Jersey. I guess like what I'm okay. So like, there's the obvious question, right? Like, I just want to talk about Jack Hughes and get a sense of like, is he like a lock? Is he like a lock to be a point per game player next year? The answer is probably yes, but it'll be fun to talk about. Like, he had 56 points in 49 games this campaign, and that was like even higher. Like, he didn't even start that hot. He's like, before that injury, he was like doing even much better than that. So probably that'll be a fun question to ask, even though we all know what the answer is going to be. I'll be really surprised. Like, I don't know, maybe Jack Hughes is more like a 70-point player. I'd be very surprised to hear that answer. Maybe the more interesting question will be the goaltending, right? Like, for the past 2 seasons, they've brought in a UFA who was supposed to split time with Blackwood. A couple seasons ago, they brought in Crawford, and he retired before the season started. Then they brought in Jonathan Bernier this year. And did he even play? I'm not sure. Like, obviously, he didn't play much, and he's like, I think, retired or...
He was great to start the season. He had a couple really good starts, but then he was really inconsistent. And then, yeah, on the shelf to the point that we have no idea if and when he's going to play again.
Yeah. And then Mackenzie Blackwood also has been on the shelf all year. And we saw Nico Dawes at some point step up. So that was interesting. But Blackwood's actually is interesting because he's going to return next week. So we will finally get a couple games from Blackwood. And then it'll be fun to, talk with the beat writer and find out, is Blackwood like still part of the plan? Like, is it like Blackwood and Dawes for next year with the hopes that one of them can like really take the job? Or are they going to do another big UFA signing and hope that third time's a charm and they actually are able to sign a UFA goalie who is able to play this season and not either retire or get injured catastrophically?
That would be really nice. It's been a long time since New Jersey was able to rely on their goaltending, and it sounds like Blackwood is on the outs. And I think digging into that a little bit and seeing if the org still wants to invest in him the way they seem to want to before, and if they don't, what the plan B, or at this point C or D, might be. And then we'll go over to the Islanders, where honestly, Elon, my big question about the Islanders is what the heck happened? Like, there was so much struggle up and down the lineup. There wasn't a point this year where we didn't wonder about basically every single player on the Isles. Was it fatigue? Was it the weird schedule with their arena opening and COVID disruptions? Was it underperforming players who just didn't step up when they to the level that they were expected to or that they could? Was it just bad luck? There were 2 bright spots on Long Island this year. There was Ilya Sorokin, who, my question for him would be like, has he earned the number 1 role? Are we guaranteed to see the crease alternate for the final year of Varlamov's contract? I feel like I know the answer, but I just would like their sense of, is it possible for Sorokin to get a number 1 workload in Long Island? I just want to know. And if the answer is no, that's great. I've heard it from the horse's mouth. And then my other question would be about the other bright spot in Long Island, which has been Noah Dobson, who's seeing 5 more minutes a night this season compared to last season, an increased power play role, increased shot rates. And I would just want to ask, has Dobson arrived? He has arrived. That's not a question. But now that Dobson's arrived, is he here to stay? And can we expect the same next year or more or less? That's what I would want to know about Noah Dobson and his role. So Sorokin and Dobson both have seemed to have to share the spotlight just because of the system the Islanders play. But seeing as that the whole team seemed to have let the team down this season, except for those 2, is it possible that the Islanders might decide to lean on their most dependable players just a little more often? And then I'll throw in one more. Why did Matt Barzel stop shooting? Right? Or why did he stop getting ice time? Like, we've commented several times over the last couple months, ever since coming back from injury, he's not seeing very much ice. Is he still hurt? Like, is that the only thing to consider? And in September, he'll be healed and get back up to his normal playing time.
Yeah, so we'll see. Like, Barzel's hot now, actually, like 6 points in his last 7 games. So he's ending the season strong. But yeah, it'll be interesting also just to find out, like, is this now for real that Barzal and Lee aren't friends anymore? Like, it seems like Anders Lee and Brock Nelson now are the duo. Like, what's more likely, that Matt Barzal goes back to playing with Anders Lee, or that Marchand goes back to playing with Pasternak? Because it seemed like a pretty solid set in stone duo of Barzal and Lee. And yeah, this year for the second half, it hasn't been the case. Barzal's been playing with Palmieri and Parise. And it doesn't seem like a place where you can be like a point per game player like we at one point hoped Barzel could be. So yeah, that'll be interesting. By the way, I'm going to just like quickly go back to Carolina. One thing I wanted to mention and then I forgot is like the goaltending situation there is pretty dire right now, eh, Brian? Like it's not, I don't know if this could be a beat writer question just in that like, did they take too much of a risk? Like, as we said at the start of the year that Frederik Andersen and Antti Ranta could be a good tandem, or maybe I'm giving ourselves too much credit. But like, I was basically saying like these are two very injury prone goalies. I wouldn't be surprised if like Alex Lyon or whatever ends up getting a lot of play, and it actually worked out pretty well for most of the season, right? Like Andersen had this amazing year. Antti Ranta, we talked about last week about how amazing he's been, and now with Andersen injured, we were saying people should grab Ranta. Now Ranta's injured. Looks like Kochetkov and like LaFontaine are going to be their goalies potentially going into the playoffs, which is obviously not ideal. So yeah, it'll be interesting to just ask about the Canes. Like, did they did they take a bit too much of a risk? And maybe should they have been a little more careful and actually gotten a goal? Because it's so hard to say, right? So it'll be a fun conversation, obviously, to have. But okay, let's go to the Rangers now. That's where we are next here in the alphabet. And yeah, I want to ask about Lafreniere. Right? Like he's done okay this past week, 2 goals and 2 assists in his last 4 games, but still like a super disappointing sophomore season, only 29 points in 76 games. That's like very minuscule. That's not just like a good player that's like working his way up. This isn't like Svechnikov's first year. This is like just a very disappointing second season for Lafreniere after a disappointing first season. And I just wonder if the Rangers are starting to, alter their expectations, or should we alter our expectations of what the ceiling is for Lafreniere? Like, I assume he's not going to be like, a 35-point player, but like, are we looking at maybe a ceiling of like 60 as opposed to like this like big, huge superstar that we were expecting? Like, it would also be fun. Probably this would be like an awkward question to ask. I guess I wouldn't ask it. Brian, tell me if this would be too rude to ask the Rangers beat writer, but like to ask, like, do you think if they could have a do-over, would they take someone else with that pick? Because there's like a lot of players this year that have, gotten a chance to play from that draft, like Stützle in Ottawa, Lundell in Florida has been so good. Dawson Mercer was picked at 18th. He's been like an impact player for New Jersey. Like, I'd be curious even to get like, Lucas Raymond, of course, right, on Detroit. So I'd be interested also to get like a Victor to come on and give a ranking. Like, if someone was drafting a new dynasty league right now for, you're going to draft your team, these are the players you're going to have forever. I wonder like Lafreniere would rank in terms of like who you draft from that 2020 NHL draft. Because then there's a bunch of other guys, like Byfield, like Sanderson in Ottawa who hasn't played yet. Holtz. Like, there's a lot of players that I wonder if they've sort of already overtaken Lafreniere and what we expect from them long term. So that'll just be a really fun conversation to get a sense of what's been going wrong and if there's still light at the end of this tunnel.
Yeah, I see Lafreniere still being that sort of late round flyer next year in drafts that he was this year, and it didn't pan out, but he's had a super flat season on the whole. And it is, I think, a little uncommon to look at it such a recent draft and say, hey, if we were redrafting today, how different would it look? And that number 1 pick for Lafreniere might not be in the same spot. And there's no clear, we'll see what happens to Ryan Strome in the offseason, but there's no clear entry point for Lafreniere to get on that top power play unit either. I know like we want to move on to Ottawa, but my quick question on the Rangers would be, was there something from the eye test from someone who watched Chris Kreider play night in, night out that makes his performance more believable than I feel it has been just by looking mainly at his numbers? I have not seen a lot of Rangers hockey, but I have looked at like shot charts and I've followed different theories for why he's suddenly a 50-goal player after never having more than 28 goals in a season and being like a sort of inconsistent 55-point player his whole career, now point per game, led by those 51 goals and 26 on the power play. So I would just want the eye test perspective from the beat writer on what's changed in Kreider's game, or if anything's changed in Kreider's game to make us really think that there's a likelihood he can do this again next season. Now moving on to Ottawa, the first question I have, Elon, is actually the same one you have. You asked it to me on last week's show or the one before, which was who's going to get the most points next season between Norris, Stützle, and Batherson? Who's going to have the best? I feel like that's a tough question for beat writers because they don't have that fantasy perspective. So maybe the better question is who's going to have the most opportunity to put up points next year? So I want to know. I had a hard time answering that question, so I'd like someone else to. But my question is going to be, for about Thomas Chabot. We've mentioned his poor power play performance a few times over the course of the season. Somebody who drafted him thinking, yeah, I've got the top power play quarterback on Ottawa that has a power play led by Brady Tkachuk and has had some talent that's emerged. Like this year, we would have been excited. Oh, and Josh Norris and Drake Batherson. Now that means something. It means more now than it did at the start of the year. However, Chabot has not been able to take advantage of it. He has just 45 power play points in his last 246 games. That's the equivalent of about 3 NHL seasons. So about 15 power play points a year in 82 games. And the last 3 years, it's actually been lower because 4 years ago, Chabot started off really well on the power play. Crazy low point production for a power play one guy. This is what we would expect a power play two forward to be doing, not a power play one defenseman. So does this mean that Thomas Chabot is not succeeding as a top power play quarterback? Is he at any danger of being replaced? It sends looking for more production from that place. And who are the candidates? You've got Eric Brandstrom in the picture. You've got Jake Sanderson entering the picture. Or maybe nothing's wrong with this, and Thomas Chabot plays his role well on the power play. It's just not a role that's tied closely to production. And we shouldn't expect more from him going forward. But the power play, Ottawa's happy with what it looks like with Chabot there. And we should just never really expect him to have more than 13 to 15 power play points in a season.
Yeah, that'll be a really fun conversation for sure. Yeah, with those other guys, like you said, like are the Sens gonna have maybe like 470 plus point players next year, right? Like maybe all of Tkachuk, Norris, Stützle, and Batherson could all break 70, and it's like who cares? Like who's the best? Like they'll all be awesome. And yeah, but with Chabot, yeah, it might just be a case where that power play one defenseman just doesn't get as many points. I guess a bonus question that I'll just throw out for Ottawa is like, how confident should we be that like Anton Forsberg is going to be the starting goalie next year and play a bunch of games? Like, I just want to get a sense of like, I assume it's going to be Forsberg and Gustafsson next year. I guess Matt Murray's still around.
We'll how could you forget about Matt Murray, who we talked last week or was on the Patreon cast about how he's actually been good. Like Matt Murray has been the better goalie. We do know, but it's going to limit. But he's probably still going to start the season as the number one and be the number one for whatever 4 game stretches he's healthy for, which means it's going to be pretty hard for Forsberg to run away with the job. But I guess the question is if Murray gets injured, does Forsberg get straight up number one status?
Well, don't forget also they did like extend Forsberg. I wonder if they know that Murray's going to get injured anyways, why not? And if they're actually trying to win next season, why not just start with the goalie that you're planning on leaning on for the year and start on like make Murray the backup? And then, like I feel like almost that would be the better way to go. But that'll be fun. That'll be the conversation we'll have with whoever we get. Do we have an Ottawa person? Ian Mendez, maybe? We used to talk to Haley and now she works for Calgary. We'll find someone.
We would love to get Ian Mendez, maybe Haley. I don't know. It seemed to be a miscommunication last year. We dropped the ball, got dropped somewhere. We were so close, but maybe we'll give it another run this year.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Philly. I guess my question again with goaltending is just going to be like, will Carter Hart be a superstar goalie in the league? Like, would he already be a superstar goalie in the league if he played for a different team? Like, how much? Like, he had a decent year this year, right? 905 save percentage is actually higher. Like, when I looked to see what his save percentage was this season, I'm actually impressed that he hit 905 on this dumpster fire of a team. Like, he's only 23 years old. The tweets I've been seeing out of Philly are that Carter Hart has been good and like we should feel bad for him. So I just want to get a sense of like, is he like a really good goalie in just a terrible situation? Like, here's another way to ask the question: if Igor Shesterkin was on Philly this season, I want to know what his save percentage would have been, because like the Rangers aren't amazing. It's just Shesterkin still is like having this insane season, but could even Igor do well if he was on this Philly team? Because that would give a sense of like how much we should blame Carter Hart versus feel really bad for him.
I think we should feel pretty bad for Carter Hart. He's actually played. I mean, we can't say what Igor Shesterkin would have done in Philly, but we can say what the average NHL goalie would have done in Philly. And it is what Carter Hart has done this season. Carter Hart has just been dealt a really poor hand by the team he's playing for. Remember that Philly lost Couturier and Ryan Ellis essentially for the season. And those were not only 2 good players, but 2 of the more likely to be defensively responsible players on the team. And it's shown in their expected goals against numbers. Philly's the 5th worst team if you're ranking by expected goals against per 60 minutes at all strengths. So Carter Hart has done a good job of being a decent goalie on a really, really tire fire team. There's a tweet I saw from one of my favorite Philly followers. Philly follows on Twitter, NHL Flyera, like an A instead of the S, like NHL Flyers. Anyway, and they pointed out that the most absurd season of NHL scoring in a long time. We've talked about all these like players getting point per game, 100 points. So all this scoring in the NHL this year, and the Flyers have 2 players on the roster with more than 40 points. That's it. As there's no run support, there's no defense, no goalie. I think even Igor Shesterkin would not have a hope picking up wins. Maybe he'd put up a slightly better save percentage because he is better than the average goalie. But I don't think he'd really be helping that team a whole lot more than Carter Hart has. So shout out to Carter Hart for the work he's been doing. And maybe, I mean, I'd say he's someone that you could target in drafts next year, but I just don't know. Like, I would want to know from the Philly beat writer, like, can we hope for a turnaround, or like, are we rebuilding now? And this is just how it's going to be for a couple of years. Speaking of a team that has avoided rebuilding for some time now, Pittsburgh. We've had some great chats with Jesse Marshall over the years. And I just want to know, like, my immediate thought was, why did Brian Rust get moved away from Sidney Crosby? Remember how mad we all were when that happened, and how, like, playing with Malkin, it wasn't clicking, and then Malkin got suspended. So Brian Rust, what was the thinking there in that one moment in time? I actually don't have any big questions about the team. I guess I'd ask, like, has Tristan Jarry earned forgiveness from the fan base this year? Has he earned their trust and the organization's trust? Are the Penguins happy with how Rickard Rakell worked out? 13 points in 16 games as a Penguin so far. Is that something that could continue? And I'd also want his take on Evan Rodriguez, not even Pittsburgh specific. His contract is up. And I think, like Nichushkin, he's about to enter like a new tier of salary, maybe not the Nichushkin tier, but a tier that at least respects that he could be a top 6 player somewhere in the league. And I just want to get Jesse's, or whichever beat writer's thoughts on whether Evan Rodriguez has looked through the eye test as a legitimate top 6 player, because he certainly has looked like that in his numbers.
Yeah, definitely. I think that as far as your Jarry question, obviously it'll depend on how the playoffs go, because last year is where he really flamed out. So obviously we're not going to do any beat writer interviews with playoff teams until they've been eliminated. And yeah, Rakell will be an interesting one too. He's in UFA at the end of the year. So again, probably the answer to that will be how things go in the playoffs, right? But he's playing on the top line. So he is going to have the opportunity to continue to put up points in Pittsburgh. Let's go now to San Jose, where we'll hopefully get Sheng Peng again, like we have for the past couple of years. Always a fun interview. I'm just going to want to ask Sheng, like, when can I be excited about the Sharks? Like, I want to be a Sharks fan. I have friends who are Sharks fans. Shout out to John. Eric Karlsson's there, one of my favorite players. And it's like, they just signed Tomas Hertl to this extension, which kind of like indicates that they plan to be good. Like, you don't generally sign a player to a contract like this if you're rebuilding. And like, they have reasons to be excited, right? Like, they're going to have injections next year of like William Eklund, who looked really good in that short stint. They've got Kakkonen, who was a little shaky in his first couple of games, but he's like settled in really nicely, right? 5 straight quality starts. So maybe he and Reimer can make like a above average tandem next year. I don't know what happens with Aiden Hill. I guess that'll also be a question. Also, there's Tomas Bordello, who we talked about last week, who's only played 4 games so far, but that's looked good. I'm at a point now, like, he's another guy that, by the way, that was drafted in that same draft as Lafreniere. And I feel like for next year, at least, I'd probably rather take Bordello than Lafreniere, at least
that's
in a 1
crazy.
year. In a 1 year league.
No
like,
way.
Lafreniere is like a 30-point player.
I'd make that bet with you now.
Okay, let's do it. Bordelo's been getting like really good deployments so far and good power play time. Like, I just feel like he's getting already better deployment than Lafreniere. So I guess obviously we'll see what happens next year. But I'll make that bet with you. Write it down. Someone write this down, because I feel pretty okay about it. But yeah, I just want to know, is this enough? Like, will these injections of these young players, you know, we've seen Timo Meier step up. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they have pieces to potentially be a good team, but obviously it hasn't worked out yet. They were good for a stretch this year. So I'll be curious to get Sheng's opinion on, like, can we be excited about the Sharks, or is that just a fool's errand and it'll just lead to disappointment again?
You get really excited about the Sharks. Like, you were super excited about Eklund and Dahlin all season long, even when, you know, and you had reason to be. I'm just wondering if you're falling into the same. You do really, like, maybe it's because of all your friends who are Sharks fans, but you like to get excited. You clearly do want to cheer for the Sharks. So I would love that take. I want you to drop that take about Bordello versus Lafreniere.
By the way, to be clear, I'm saying Bordello over Lafreniere for next year. I'm not saying
No,
like in a dynasty league. Yeah, okay.
I understand you, and I still think it's kind of wild.
Well, I don't know. Lafreniere is probably not someone I'm going to draft next year in a 1-year league. I'm not drafting him in cupful. So
Yeah, well,
it's
we'll
not
see
as
what
if
the
it's like such a
Rangers.
crazy. It's not like it's such a crazy hot take. I'm saying this free agent will be better than this free agent, right?
No, but if there's somebody I want to take a chance on, it would be Lafreniere over Bordello. But hey, we'll see. I think
Speaking
it's a fun
yeah,
hot take.
speaking of young players, well,
Oh
actually, I guess it's
yeah.
your turn. Let's go to
Well,
Seattle and see if
we're
you have
going
the same young player in mind.
definitely. It's Matty Beniers, right? 5 points in 6 games. Uh, you were wondering, Elon, in your notes, if he's the like already the front runner for the Calder next year. And my question is Beniers the odds-on favorite to lead the team in scoring next season? I guess Jared McCann is probably the main competition, but no one else. We thought maybe Jordan Eberle or Jaden Schwartz would really, I don't know, be able to find an extra level to their production, and they haven't. They've sort of stayed about where we'd expect them in that boring 55 to 60 point range. It's nice, but we've talked about them all season long. Hey, this is happening with them. Should we change our ideas? Answer has been no all the way. So can Matty Beniers break out of that 55, 60 point mold in Seattle and lead the team at such a young age? I would also want to know, I guess I'm dropping several questions for each team now, so you can stop me if I'm going on too long. But I want to know if Vince Dunn has definitely earned the power play quarterback role. I think he has. Maybe that's a bad question. Then maybe this is just me wanting to shout out that Vince Dunn, since taking over the top power play quarterback role, is on a 23 power play point pace this season. He's got 5 power play points in 18 games. So sorry, he's not on that 23 power play point pace for this whole year, but just since he took over that role. So has he earned it for sure? Is he going to hold it? What?
All I know is that after he got that role, I streamed him in for my cupful finals or semifinals, and he did nothing for me. So I'm still yawn on Vince Dunn from my small sample of like I saw what he was doing. I was like, it seems like a good stream. Seattle had a good schedule, and Seattle has a good schedule next week, so he might be a good suggestion for people still in their playoffs. But he's definitely not someone I feel like I could rely on to give me anything consistent.
Yeah, it feels like maybe this is a 40-point player, right? Kind of like the Nick Leddy sort of role where, yeah, you're the power play quarterback on a team where there's like, it's not that consequential. So I just want to know exactly how, if he can be exciting and if he's for sure going to be in that role. I think I'd really like to know sort of the organizational perspective on Grubauer. Like, what's the plan after this brutal season for him? 890 save percentage, 34% quality starts. What happened being on the front lines there as a beat writer, watching things go night in, night out? Like, this Grubauer had 921 over the course of his career. That's 31 points higher than a save percentage this year, and a 60% quality start percentage. That's twice the quality start percentage he's had this year. Grubauer's been god awful at 5-on-5, especially compared to his career history. So why did things go so wrong this year? Do the Kraken regret that move? Are there lessons to be learned? And then maybe zooming out to the bigger picture, what was the main miscalculation that led to this season being such a disappointing one in Seattle, where coming into the year, they're projected to finish at the top of their division, even conference, and be legit playoff team? Like, what? I just want to know what happened. What happened in Seattle? What did we all think, or what was thought to go so right that ended up going so wrong? Maybe we're getting it wrong, and this season was somehow a kind of relative success, and the bar was set too high from the start. That's what I want to know, and that's like a big organizational standpoint. I know there's not a lot of fantasy relevance in there, but there's not a lot of fantasy relevance on the team. So I think that's where I'd go with my question.
I think I want to be like George Costanza's dad and just be like, why did you not take Tarasenko? What are you thinking? just yell at the beat writer, or yell at Allison, even though it's not even her fault. Be like, why didn't you take him? He's so good. Oh, well. Speaking of Tarasenko, let's go to St. Louis, who I don't think we've ever had a beat writer interview with. So maybe we'll break that streak this year. And I don't know, like I have nothing interesting to say here. That's all the questions I've been asking on the podcast and we've been discussing. Like I'm obviously going to be like, Rob Thomas, Tarasenko, Buchnevich. That line is insane. Like, are these all like for real numbers? Is Rob Thomas now like a point per game player that we can depend on? So there's going to be that conversation. There's also obviously going to be the Husso Binnington conversation, which obviously the playoffs will inform. It'll be interesting to see. I assume Husso's going to be the starter going into it. Obviously, if he falters, that would make for an interesting offseason. So those are the two big ones, right? Like that line. I guess I could be like, where did Ryan O'Reilly go? I think we already kind of know the answer, that he's just not being asked to play. That's like, they're spreading the offense around. That's what we've discussed. But yeah, I don't really have anything new. Like regular listeners of Keeping Karlsson already know what our like interested thoughts are in St. Louis, I think, unless you have something new, Brian. But yeah, those are the key ones for me. Rob Thomas and like Tarasenko, and then the Husso Binnington situation.
That covers it. We spent a lot of time talking about St. Louis this year and all these players because they all sort of popped up. So it'll be good to sort of take the look back with the beat writer, and it'll be interesting to take a look forward fantasy wise. We talked about them on our Patreon cast too. A team that we don't ever.
Okay, I wanted to say something quickly.
So just jump in.
Z2, yeah. Brian, I'm really excited to hear what you're going to have to say about Tampa right now. I was trying so hard to think of like what my question will be about Tampa, and like I couldn't even think of anything. It's like the same players doing the same things every year, year in, year out. So I'm really glad that this random selection has landed on you coming up with your Tampa questions. I'm ready for you to blow me away with this one.
I don't have a good one. Like compared to St. Louis, a team we've talked so much about, Tampa, we barely ever talk about because they basically are just as expected, right? You've got, as we talked about earlier in the show, that like increasingly heavy, like front loaded lineup where okay, I'm expecting big points from Kucherov and Stamkos, pretty big points from Braden Point, big points from Hedman, and then not much from everybody else, but to play their roles. Oh yeah, and Andrei Vasilevsky to start a million games, and Brian Elliott to be so-so when he starts. So like, there's not a lot of questions. I think like it's almost like what's the point in having this Tampa Bay, and they just seem so predictable, and there's very transparent with their strategy and what they're trying to do and who's going to produce. They don't have, unless I'm mistaken, someone please throw it out there, but it's not like they have any prospects jumping up the pipeline either who are going to be taking on bigger roles that we need to keep an eye on. So I guess my only question would be, and I had to rack my brain for this, Anthony Cirelli and Mikhail Sergachev. They've been complementary players forever. Is there room for them to take a step forward and break out? Or are they essentially stuck in that mold until you've either Victor Hedman ages out for Sergachev or one of the other big names forward ages out for Cirelli to get more opportunity? That's it.
Yeah, I might skip
and I think
that
I know
one.
the answer to those. The answer is no.
If Ben does the interview, that might be the first episode of Keeping Karlsson that I'm not on, that I don't listen to. I kid. Of course I would listen. Okay, let's go to Toronto now. My turn. My question is, I think I already alluded to this earlier when talking about Hyman. Like, is Michael Bunting as good as or better than Zach Hyman was? Like, are the Leafs just like, this worked out so well, we have a replacement who is just as good or better? Bunting is this rookie season, by the way, even though he's older, like 63 points in 79 games. Insane. Obviously, a big part of that is playing with Matthews and Marner, but obviously he held his own and held that spot all season long. I'm just curious, like, how much credit do we give Kyle Dubas for like letting Hyman walk and bringing in Bunting as a replacement? Like, do you think he foresaw this from the start and like this was his master plan, or do you think he just he just like couldn't afford to sign Hyman and he got lucky with the Bunting signing? Like, I'm just curious to know how much foresight went into this like seemingly just like perfect replacement coming in for like a fraction of the cost.
It's a great question. How much credit should we give to Toronto for this seamless transition from Hyman to Bunting? Can anyone succeed there? Or is Bunting just like Hyman and they knew that coming in? Or is Bunting a different player but still super successful? I love that, Elon. How much credit can we give the Toronto front office? Then I guess the next team on the docket would be Vancouver. And I mean, we've talked about Elias Pettersson, right? And how he was super cold to start the year. He's been amazing on the back half. And honestly, I think that's just what I would come to expect from Pettersson. So I think my question would be, what was going so wrong in the first half of the year? And are we convinced it's gone? And was it the full reason why players weren't producing? Like, I assume there was an issue with morale. There was talk about Pettersson's contract. So I think I know the answer to this. I don't have much interest. I see Pettersson has stepped up and has become this, 90 to 100 point pace player again. So I'm not that concerned about him. The guy I am concerned more about is Brock Besser, who is pacing for just 53 points this year. I'm looking at his numbers. I'm seeing, okay, at 5-on-5, he's got a 6.5% on-ice shooting percentage. That's low. His own shooting percentage is 7% at 5-on-5. That's also low. And my question would be, Is that the whole story for Brock Besser? Has he just been unlucky and we can expect him to get back to 65, 70 points next year? I mean, there's no more third line shenanigans with Brock Besser. That's good. There was a bit of a time where we were scared about that, but I just need some reassurance that Brock Besser is going to be as good as he always has been and that this has just been bad luck. Confirm. That would be my question.
Yeah, I grabbed Besser in our Keep 8 league, Brian, as a free agent right at the end, like after I was eliminated. And I'm curious to know, like, is there any reason to consider him as a keeper or was he a free agent for a reason? So, yeah, I'll definitely be interested to hear the answer to that question when we talk to hopefully Harman Dayal. He's been great when we've talked about him, talked about the Canucks with him over the past couple of years. So over in Vegas now, my question is definitely going to be about Jack Eichel. Just like, how has he looked? Like, obviously, Vegas is going to have a very interesting final week. They can still potentially make the playoffs. I think they have a really critical game actually today against the Sharks, which is kind of fun. Like the Sharks have something to play for today. I think I saw in an interview that they were saying, one of the players was saying that like this is like their biggest game of the year for a lot of them, like to try to knock Vegas out of the playoffs. But yeah, regardless, and if they have playoffs, we'll have more data. But yeah, just like Jack Eichel, is he like the same superstar player as his pre-surgery self? Like overall, the numbers aren't so exciting, right? 21 points in 30 games so far going into today. That's only a 57-point pace. Obviously, we've come to know and love Eichel as like a point per game or higher player. He's been taking a lot of shots. He's averaging almost 4 shots per game. So that's great. So I'm just going to want to get, the eye test answer of like, how has Eichel looked? Like, is he like still this like huge superstar? Or do we need to start adjusting like what we think about him? Again, it's been a small sample size so far. So that's why I want to ask. I'm not saying I have a idea one way or the other just yet.
I like the theme that basically the beat writers, we want the eye test. We want to run their eye test on what they've seen. And I feel like if we frame the whole series as we want the eye test and ear test, which the ear test would be what do you hear on a day-to-day basis coming from the locker room, coming from management, coming from the player. I feel like that's another big piece of the puzzle that we don't have as hosts of a fantasy hockey podcast. So I like that continued focus on the eye test because I'm looking at Eichel's numbers and they look okay. I want to do a little more digging when the time comes, but there you go. Good target, Elon. I also want to know like if Vegas has learned any lessons from like where they've landed. Now it feels like Vegas decided to take a couple big swings early on in their existence as a franchise that were really exciting and it worked out. And now every time, and this is related to Eichel, every time things are flagging or they just feel like they need to, they're going to take another big swing. And eventually these big swings are, or maybe they already have started biting the team in the butt. So I wonder if there's like needs to be a change in organizational philosophy because they were rewarded a couple times with it and they just keep going back to the well. Okay, well, we'll just go take a big swing. Okay, we'll just go take a big swing. And whether they're at all like deterred from doing that later on.
I mean, like to be fair, right? Like Pacioretty and Mark Stone have missed a big chunk of the season with injuries. So I don't. If I was management, I'd be like, don't blame me. Like I can't, control injuries, right? Like they set up a really good team, and then they just didn't have their full firepower. And I think that would be a reasonable excuse. We'll see how it shakes out next year. Shams is also bringing up in the chat that it'll be interesting to ask about the goaltending, right? Because Robin Lehner at this point, that was actually crazy this past week. Brian, did you see how like one source was saying that Lehner's going to have season-ending surgery? Then the coach was like, no, it was just a maintenance day and we expect him to play. And I think that Leonard's backing up today in this game against the Sharks. Thompson's going to be starting. So that was kind of wild. Wait, I hear like a bunch of banging right now. One sec. Okay. I think I'll just keep talking. I think Thompson is going to get the start tonight. But yeah, that was pretty wild. But yeah, in general, like Shams is saying, the goaltending is kind of a question mark for me just because Logan Thompson looked really good when he played. And also Robin Lehner like still hasn't shown us that he can be a full season-long starting goalie. Like this is another season where he struggled a bit. He struggled with injuries, and he's always been like really great over these past few years. But he's been in tandems. He hasn't had to take on that workload. Like one of the things that makes Andrei Vasilevsky like such a stud is not only his great numbers, but the fact that he plays almost all the games, like you said. So that'll be another good question to see. Like at this point, are we still expecting Lehner to be the starter, or maybe next year do they just go straight into tandem 50-50 with Thompson and not even try to burn him to the ground?
I'll be honest, that was my big question too, but I figure it'll be sorted out by the time you get to talk to our Vegas beat writer, and the truth will have come out, hopefully, or enough of it that we know what to anticipate. I'm going to stay in the crease when we talk about Washington and what we want to know about them, I saw a great quote from Peter Laviolette today saying that, each goalie has a chance to take the net and we'll see who earns it going into the playoffs to be our playoff starter. It's an open competition. And I'm like, okay, this has been an 80 game open competition in Washington that no goalie has proven themselves capable of winning. So is this a need to address in the offseason? Because, hey, the Caps have limited time left with Alex Ovechkin. And I imagine this would also be a question. Are they going to go as hard as possible for the rest of Ovechkin's career? How aggressive are they going to need to be to contend? And do they think they have one of their goaltenders of the future in this pair between Vanecek and Samsonov, or are they ready to write them both off because of how neither one has been able to step up and take the job they've been trying to earn all season long?
Yes, it's a good point. I need to go for just a second because I'm just going to ask some noise to be removed.
Okay.
I'll be back in a moment.
Yeah. I'll take a question from the chat if anyone's got one. The Lainer thing's wild, it was clear from the start that there was definitely some miscommunication or I don't know, some friction, miscommunication at best, friction at worst between the team and player. And the team said one thing was going to happen and the player said another. And Lainer's been a guy, I like Lainer. He sticks up for himself and he speaks up about the way players get treated. So it wouldn't at all be surprising where he's saying like, screw you. And also Pete DeBoer, get out of here. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, I almost thought at the start, like he was just covering for Lainer. Like Lainer was actually hurt, but Vegas didn't want to disclose it. And so they just said, oh yeah, it was his performance. We weren't happy and that everybody was in on it. But clearly I don't think that's the case. And I don't think DeBoer is a good coach. So if I had to choose between Pete DeBoer and Robin Lehner, I would choose Robin Lehner.
Okay. Did the Sens blow it more, Brian, by letting Lehner go or by letting Ben Bishop go? What's the biggest goalie regret in Ottawa?
I don't think either one's a regret because they haven't had a team to contend with since letting either one of those guys go. So it doesn't really matter. I guess Lehner because he's the one who's still going.
Yeah. Until this surgery that's about to happen.
Well, maybe this is a chance for him to come back to Ottawa. Sure. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. So you ended Washington kind of saying you're going to see like if they're going to keep pushing, right?
Yeah. I mean, like whether the goalie of the future is one of these two guys or if they've decided like, hey, like they've each had a full season to step up.
Yeah. And yeah, again, of course, we'll have a playoffs to get a sense of like how those goalies do before we do this interview. But man, I'll also just specifically with Vanecek, like I want to ask, like, what the hell happened with that expansion draft, right? Like they gave him up, then they got him back for a second. Like I wonder if that was the plan all along, or if they, just got lucky that they realized, I guess we'll get him back. Maybe they were like going for some UFA goalie and couldn't get him, so they're like, I guess let's just get Vanecek back instead. But okay, let's go to Winnipeg now. It's my turn to come up with a question. I guess my question will be a similar theme to a few of the other ones I've come up with earlier. Another player who went from doing nothing, I guess like a Matt Duchene, right? Like what changed with Pierre-Luc Dubois between last year and this year for him to go from a below half point per game player to someone who's up to 58 points in 77 games so far going into today? I guess Winnipeg is finished beating Colorado today. Very impressive game. I feel a little bit bad. We had a question from, 1 sec, let me just find it. It was an ad drop trade. Where is that? Our Discord has so many fun channels, and I can't find the question from. Oh, here. No, it's not here. Oh, sit start. Oh, yeah. We had a question from Oskimo today asking if they should bench Hellebuck against the Avalanche. And I was like saying, I think I would play him, but obviously it's a scary start. And then Oskimo did bench him, and it's too bad because Hellebuck actually had a really good game. I guess with Rantanen out, the Avalanche aren't as scary. But yeah, Dubois, oh yeah, the reason I was going to look is to see what Dubois did, and he didn't get a point. So what are you going to do? But still, he's had a really good season after last year doing nothing. So I'm just curious to know, was this just like he's a better player, or did the coach, like his ice time is like completely different, right? Last year he was averaging 15 minutes average time on ice. This year we're closer to 19 minutes. Like a jump like that is extreme. And so, yeah, it'll just be a sense of like, did Dubois become a better player, or is it like this new coach, after Maurice left? But he was already doing pretty well like before Maurice left. So, yeah, I'll just want to get a sense of like what happened between last year and this year, and like which Pierre-Luc Dubois is the real version. You'd assume the one from this year is the real version, but obviously it'll be fun to get the final take from Murat, who's actually already agreed. We've got that one locked in. We haven't picked a time yet, but we're going to get Murat Atesh to talk about the Jets. Maybe we'll get him to bat leadoff for this 32 beats.
That'd be great. It'll be fun. Like some of these guys have been with us from the start of the 32 beat series. And if we continue it and they get to move later, their interview moves later and later into the off season because their teams go deeper, like Murad and Harman and Prashant. Like we talk to those guys early on every season long. We talk to those guys early on every season. So hopefully that changes for them, but not for us. We love starting with them. Okay. Anaheim. We're going back to the start of the alphabet now, to the two teams that preceded Boston in the alphabet. This really did not work, but maybe at least it was fair, everyone. All right. Anaheim. First off, I'm going to say, don't hold your breath that we're going to get a beat writer to talk to on Anaheim. We have tried every year we've done this, and we've reached out to at least 3 or 4 different beat writers and failed to even get a response from any of them. So, hey, if you are an Anaheim beat writer or speak to them regularly, maybe you can look us up. I know, Prince, you're doing your best to help us out. Prince, one of our faithful listeners. But what I want to ask the Anaheim beat writer, which is like, it would be like a golden moment because we haven't been able to ask this the last 2 years, but the storyline has continued, is what is going on with John Gibson? Through his first 5 seasons in the NHL, he was above 920 more often than not, never below a 914. Gibson posted a 60% quality start percentage. He was an elite goalie, made the case for best in the league from 2015, from the 2015-16 season through to the 17-18 season. But in the last 3 years, so going back to 2019-20, Gibson's save percentages have now been 904, 903, and a 905 this year, with a 46% quality start percentage over these last 3 years. Like one of the last 3 seasons, it was actually the worst one, the 903. Gibson was actually playing above his expected 5-on-5 numbers, but the other 2 have been below. And this current season is the worst of Gibson's career when you compare him to his expected Fenwick save percentage numbers, which is the way to say, like, well, how would another goalie do in his skates? And another goalie would be doing much better than John Gibson is now at 5-on-5. Gibson's going to be 29 years old next year. It's 5 more years left. It's $6.5 million. He's still getting all the starts down the stretch. So are we just going to do this again next year? Like, where does the organization stand with John Gibson and vice versa? And I want to know what happened, like between his elite days and his current days, that have made him, well, for lack of a better word, suck. And whether we can expect him to ever be able to return to form, or if this is just the new John Gibson. Maybe there's an injury or like something that happened we don't really know too much about. That's what I want to get from the Anaheim beat writer.
Yeah, I mean, I know definitely he had a lot of injuries back in the day, like back when he was good. Like one problem with him was he kept on missing time every now and then. So I wonder if it's just that added up and it's just kind of affected him overall in his abilities. So yeah, it'll be fun. If we ever get an Anaheim beat writer, it'll be fun to ask about Gibson. Also, I'll have another one of my typical, like, where did this player come from with Troy Terry, right? Like he went from being a non-factor these past 3 seasons, and now this season he's on a 73-point pace. You know, a lot of that coming from that amazing start, but he still kept it up for the most part. So it'll be fun to also talk about him. And then our last team here is Arizona, and the question I'm going to want to ask is, again, a similar question, is what we saw from Clayton Keller for real. He had 50 points in his final 46 games, over a point per game for that stretch before he got injured to end the year for him. I'm curious to know what changed. Like, do we give a lot of credit to Nick Schmaltz? Was it like them together, like a Fiala Boldy, question similar to that? Or like, is it just Clayton Keller all of a sudden became a superstar? Because, last couple of seasons, he was like a 50-ish point guy. Actually, for the last 3 seasons, he had that good rookie campaign, then kind of just became a boring old player. And it's not as if, this year he got lucky and got to be surrounded by such amazing players. Like, yeah, he had Nick Schmaltz, but it's like, it seems like Clayton Keller just took this huge step forward. Remember that stretch, Brian, for like a couple of weeks where like we were afraid of starting goalies against Arizona because they were scoring like 8 or 9 goals every game. And that was Clayton Keller, like driving it, like Keller and Schmaltz. So yeah, I just want to know, like, is he a superstar now, or was this just like a weird aberration? I mean, it was a long aberration if it was one, but it still kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and this is another eye test question where I think Keller has legitimately been better this year, and I want to know what's the story behind that? What changed in his game? So that'll be I'm a believer, and I think he can probably carry Nick Schmaltz to another successful season too. So I want to know if he's going to be given the chance to do it again next year, and I think he will. I know coaching had something to do with it, but I want to know more the nuts and bolts. I might already be a believer, and this might just be like to confirm that I'm right to believe, but sometimes it's nice to know exactly what's changed and what's happened so we can sort of add this to our general knowledge of how players mature and evolve and actually get better. As it's good to always be able to explain and justify when a player changes levels, like either for better or for worse. So picking up that info on Clayton Keller would be great.
Yeah, well, especially because a lot of people were, hard. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, well, especially because a lot of people were being really hard on Chaika, for signing him to that crazy contract. Like he's only in year 2 of, I think it's a 8-year deal 8-year deal, 7.15 million per year. So, after the last couple of years, it was looking like maybe this was a big mistake, and Keller's just like a 50-ish point guy, and he's getting such huge stacks of money going into his pocket and against Arizona's cap. So obviously after this season, it looks like maybe it's even a good contract. So yeah, it'll be good to just talk about how are we feeling about this guy for like the still long-term future, because he's signed for a lot of years. But okay, Brian, we did it. We went through every team. I see Boston is next. Your boring friend, Jake DeBrusk, has an assist today. So obviously he wanted to stick it to you for saying that he puts you to sleep. But I don't think we're going to go back to Boston because we've made it through every single team. So now we are at the point of the show where we're done with our content, but since it is the end of the season, it is time to pay tribute to the teams that lost and congratulate the teams that won, because this fantasy season is coming to an end. First of all, obviously, big thanks to the listeners, right? Everyone who sent in these tributes or like want us to celebrate their victories, we really want to thank you for even sending that to us, because that means that you care about us, we care about you, and we really thank you for listening to another season of episodes of Keeping Karlsson. We hope you liked it. We're trying our best to put the best content out every single week. We'd love any feedback you want to give us, but yeah, we really appreciate our listeners. We just want to thank you for sticking with us all season. And now, Brian, I guess, so I'm going to cue up the Happy Father's Day track one last time, I'd imagine. And we have a list of teams that unfortunately were not able to pull it out. The fact that you sent it to us today or for this week must mean you made it really far. So, congratulations to you on getting this far. But alas, all good things come to an end.
There's also a bunch of teams that I think we missed earlier. So it's actually not true. And we've heard from very few winners. I can't imagine that has much to do with listening to our show. Like I would assume people listening to our show win. So if you won, let us know. We'd love
Probably
to celebrate
if you won, you're just like, you're done. You're excited. You don't need to be like tweeting at us. You unfollow us. Like, I'm a winner. I don't need these guys anymore.
Okay. The losers are Cowan's Cool Cats.
Team Burgelicious.
I think it's Burgelicious.
I
like Bergeron. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Hopplenuts is notable team / not able team.
Care Morin White Wolves. We got a whole little story here about what happened, but basically made it to the semis, threw away a bunch of Fab on Francois, which didn't work out. Team went on a losing streak. I'm summarizing here, but in the end, they lost. That's the end of the story.
That's the bottom line. That's why they're in this part of the show. Quit playing games with my Reinhardt. Nice team name. Lost in the cupful semis. This is a few weeks ago. Like I said, I'm late to some of these.
Okay.
Took Draisaitl second overall instead of Matthews. We'll see if they make a different choice given the opportunity next year.
I guess for next week we can talk about like maybe the people. If you're behind, maybe next week you'll get all the winners you're still behind on those.
I hope so. I need winners.
We need some winners. But okay, more losers. Chaos Giraffe, non-cupful team. That's a shame. You had Montembeau, Markstrom. Oh yeah, Markstrom really fell apart there when people needed him most, including against for Mark against me in the cupful finals. Ettinger, yeah. Sometimes goalies, man, you can't rely on the goalies sometimes. Too bad.
Can't win with them. Can't win without them. Two teams for longtime listener Maddie. Les Jokers de Bas Canada And Elon, the team you co-managed with him, high and dry.
Yeah,
See you later.
Lost in the finals. We tried our best. Okay. Team lost the game. That's the name of the team? Team lost the game? Okay.
It's hard to tell if that's the name of the team or it's a sentence saying that their team lost the game. Like, I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, bye.
Yeah.
Sorry you lost.
Two Canes with a Z. There's another pretty. They lost by 0.3 of a point.
Oof.
In the semis. And that was because they benched Braden Shen to play Mark Stone and Max Pacioretty, which was the difference. I would have done the same thing, I think.
Has Mark Stone turned it around yet? He was doing nothing for
we did talk about how we wouldn't necessarily activate him just because he was healthy. And
he's pointless.
Pointless.
He's coming back. Let's see how he does. And
today. He has 1 or fewer shots in 3 of his 5 games. Oof.
Well, hopefully he turns it on tonight and helps Vegas get to the playoffs so he can turn around the end of his season. But okay, sorry to 2 Canes and also sorry to 2 brothers who ended their dominant season with a close second place finish. But yeah, both the Hughes brothers missing the start, losing. If you're depending on Hughes, that hurts, right? Like Jack Hughes getting injured probably burned a lot of people.
Here's a famous loss. Felix Owls, owned by Adam in our, AKA our Cupful newsletter editor. So sorry, that's too bad. Spend less time on the newsletter next year, I guess. But please don't.
He won the league against me, so
okay.
He's fine.
There you go.
The shampoo mistake lost in the semis, and they are done with Dougie Hamilton.
The Pad City Skeets won 12 in a row and then got knocked out in the semifinals. 12 weeks in a row.
I wonder with that big winning streak, you should have not focused so much on winning those last couple of weeks and instead stocked up for the semis. Like maybe that was your problem. You went too hard because you wanted to keep that winning streak going. Maybe. Myers remorse. That's funny.
That's a good one.
Ended the season first with 15% more points than the next highest, but got unlucky in the first round. Ended up winning the losers bracket for a 5th place finish. All right. So at least he ended with a somewhat win, but still a loss. Too
bad. The Danbury Trashers, RIP. They were 20-3 on 20 of 23 matchups through the year, eliminated in the semifinals with their 4th loss. That's a real bummer. Sorry.
And then the Scooby Dubniks. Good one. Came in
good
3rd.
Team names.
Good team name. Good finish. 3rd place in the Ice Cream Packing Elite 13 League.
What happened to the Ice Cream Packing Elite 12 League? Disbanded. Some controversial trades went down, or discussions about ice cream brands.
So, Brian, is that it for the losers? Let's turn off this sad music if it's still going. And do we have any? I see only one winner in this list, so I'm not going to turn on the happy music just for this.
We have one winner, which is another good team name. Wood Kachuk won the Money League on the back of Jordan Binnington. You won't see too many people saying that, although... yeah, that's great. Way to go, Jordan Binnington, for winning a couple leagues. And I'm going to shout out my own winning team. I won a league so badly that I got paid. I was awarded the prize today, even with a week left in the season. It's a season-long points league. So congrats to Walk with Elias for crushing the competition. It's a points-only league. 2nd place is 90 points back. 3rd place is 230 points back.
What are you talking? Are you just bragging about how well you did in some Homer league against a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing?
They know what they're doing. Some of them. I did really well. I had a really great draft.
Good job.
Yeah.
I feel it's a little bit too much when the people, no offense to the person who was 15% more points than the next highest. I feel like it's look, okay, yeah, you did well. You don't need to start telling me how many more points you had, Brian, than the
save it. We'll save it for the team. Well, those are the losers saying I did so much better, but still lost. Well, I did so much better and won. So I gotta brag about something.
Congratulations, that's amazing. Did you win money in that one?
No.
Okay, too bad. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully, we've given you enough reason to consider continuing to subscribe to Keeping Karlsson for our summer series of episodes coming. Brian and I will also be giving you regular episodes, including next week. We're going to do a playoff preview, talk about the matchups, who we think is going to do well, maybe some sleepers on who we take in our playoff pools. If you're a patron of Keeping Karlsson, like Brian said at the start, it's not too late, but it will be soon to sign up for the Keeping Karlsson playoff pool. So all the info is in the Discord. So definitely get in and register ASAP, because I'm going to be setting up the leagues on Fantrax probably around Wednesday of this week, right? And so for a quick reminder, we're going to have a whole bunch of different leagues. We're going to do slow drafts. We're going to be drafting for just round 1, and then the top whatever in each league, once we know the number of signups, we'll be able to lock this down. The top whatever will move forward to the next round, where they'll have new drafts for every single round until we have a final winner at the end, and that'll be the winner of the KKPP. And I think we're still working on a prize for that, but we're going to come up with something good. I suggested to Brian and Kevin yesterday that maybe I should give up my tier 1 spotting couple as the top prize, and I got shot down for that, so that's not going to be the top prize, even if Nick DeStef wins again for the second year in a row, which would be a very impressive feat. But we'll try to come up with something really good. I know for second place, I have some random hockey books in my house that I'm ready to ship off to. We'll hopefully come up with something better for first place. So sign up for the KKPP, the best playoff pool in existence, I think. The most fun one I've ever been in.
Ever. Ever. Not just in current existence, but it's the best there is, the best there was, and probably the best there ever will be.
The best in the multiverse. Like in any conceivable universe, this is the best possible playoff pool you could play in.
It's the Bret Hart of playoff pools.
Okay. Yeah, I knew. We got it.
No, you're right. I did not need to hammer that home. I just thought it was a funny way to frame it. I wish I said it earlier.
It's like The Office, right? You say the quote and afterwards anyway, okay, whatever. I'm just going to edit some things.
All of that.
Thanks for... But yeah, okay, with that, let's cue the outro music. And Brian, why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Kevin, Tom, Derek, Andrea, Flash, David, Rob, Patty, and Tyler. Thank you so much for your extra support. Thank you to Shams Benamor for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy news rolling over at GameDayTweets.com with Elon. You can follow the key accounts on Twitter at GameDay Lines, at GameDay News NHL, and at GameDay Scoldies. Also, while you're on Twitter, follow Ben and Lewis at ShortChipsKK and Dave Benton at NHL Stream Scheme. Thanks to BrendanWeeb.com for the logos. Thanks to Pat Roach for the outro music. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge, and a little bit of Yahoo.
Great job as always, Brian. I had so much fun hearing your beat writer questions, getting your takes on mine. Looking forward to talking playoffs next Sunday.
Until then, wow, playoffs already. Well, even though some teams are going to be excluded when we do get to the playoffs, let's keep doing all we can to make sure that fantasy hockey is something that everybody can play.
Good one. Is that okay? Are you allowed to change the wording of the catchphrase like that?
You're right. That wasn't smart.
Imagine if it was a t-shirt and everyone's like, wait, is my t-shirt obsolete now? Do I need to get a new one? Fantasy hockey is something everyone can play.
It's the grammar is definitely worse.
Well, I liked what you went. I like how you said it with the playoffs and the teams being excluded. That was very clever.
Thanks.
That was a good one. Okay, fun show. We did not have 0 edit points. We have a few more than 0, but we did our best.
I think it pulled it together in the second half. I'm sorry for the start.
It'll be fine. It's easy. Editing is fun. It's a Zen experience.
That's
but okay.
Nice.
I'll hear all these pops that you're telling me that I.
Oh yeah,
all these pops. That one clipped, but that clipped on purpose.
It was your P's and your F's. There was a lot.
Because I'm looking at the waveform and I'm not seeing any big clips. So hopefully it was just something that came. Maybe it just came through on Zoom, but maybe it'll be fine in my version here.
Maybe.
But I want to be good for the live show, so I'm going to order myself a pop filter right now.
Yeah, great. I did not enjoy it, listening from.
Oh no,
it was tough.
Sorry you had to go through that.
I mean, no, like it's okay. I just like I'm. It would be hard for me to listen to the full show if that's how it
Oh.
went. So I'm hoping it's good.
Yeah, I think there's like different. I could run what's it called? There's a type of filter you could run through your audio, so you take away any like strong, like a high pass filter. It's probably more pops now as I'm saying high pass filter. Here, I could try some things right now. What is this? What's compressor? Should I do a compressor? I have all these like new features on this mic. I don't know what they really do.
So I think the compressor, like I know what it does, but I don't know I can explain in words. The compressor takes away some of the like finer points of the audio, like it flattens it a little.
Mhm.
So you can sort of fit to it's like louder and smaller.
Oh,
But
okay.
like it's not as nuanced. Like you
That's not
lose
gonna
some
help.
of the higher end details.
I have a limiter. I have an option to
It's
turn
like
the limiter on or off.
I think it's like listening to like instead of a 320 kbps MP3, it's like a 120. It's the difference between that and a 128.
Okay, well, I'll work on this for next week.
128 is more compressed.
But also, you should get this mic, assuming I could fix the pop filters.
Yeah, well, let's see you get it up and running solid yourself, and then
I assume I have permission to spend company money on a pop filter.
we start with company discussion and we end with it.
Which one do you recommend? The Gear microphone pop filter?
Are you on like Wirecutter or something?
No, I'm on Amazon.
Don't just go to Amazon.
Okay, I don't know these other sites. What's Wirecutter?
Wirecutter. It's a good, I don't know. It's like not always a lock, but they at least have like well-researched opinions on basically everything.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Bye, Brian. Have a good night.
I don't think they'll have a pop filter though.
Okay, so I'll go to Amazon. Or you tell me if you want to send me a reco.
I don't know. I don't want to
send me a housewarming gift of a pop filter.
Okay.
I'll send you my address.
With company money.
Yeah.
I don't want to
made a bunch of
you go ahead. You pick one.
Okay.
Or like go look up audio hi-fi. It's a good.
And it's just like a little piece of felt, right?
Like, yeah, actually, the one I use is homemade. Josie made it.
Could she make me one?
Probably.
That'll be there. You go. Save us some money.
Yeah, I don't. You just need like a stocking, and a wire hanger. And
this doesn't seem like something I'll be capable of doing.
Yeah,
but okay. All right, good night.
I think a pop filter is such a basic piece of equipment. There's no like, get this over that.
Yeah, let's get the cheapest one off of Amazon.
Yes, sure.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, stop recording.